Welcome to my deep dive recap of everything that happened in Pretty Little Liars. This is one of the best videos I've ever scripted, and it was so much fun to make. I was laughing the entire time. So join me as we recap this hilarious, unhinged, completely out of hand show, which isn't even trying to be serious by the end. That's my favorite thing. I love how unserious this show is. I've seen a lot of these kinds of long form deep dive videos on YouTube lately from loads of creators, and I thought, why not hop on the trend? I don't know how I haven't done this before because this was legitimately hilarious. So we're going to go through seasons 1 to 7, the major A reveals, the plot points, and get you guys caught up. Pretty Little Liars is absolutely a fever dream, and there's nothing funnier than laying it all out. And for those of you that are new here, hi, welcome. I'm Serena, and you may know me already from my viral Pretty Little Liars series on YouTube, and this is yet another one to add to the playlist, which I will link down in the description. So let's begin with season 1. Buckle up, bitches. The series opens with 4 girls in a barn having a sleepover, except it should be 5 girls, but their friend Allison went missing, and Spencer went out looking for her and said that she thought she heard somebody scream. Flash forward to a year later, Allison De Laurentiis is still missing, and then her body is found. And this is the premise of the show, which sets up the major mystery of what happened to Allison De Laurentiis. Shortly after, the girls began receiving threatening messages from someone calling themselves A. And the girls are thinking, okay, A, Allison, they sound pretty similar. Are A and Allison the same person? Is this Allison haunting us from beyond the grave? And the weird thing is that this person sending the messages is sending the messages that only their friend Allison would know. And the start of the show is pretty amazing. It's very compelling. By the end of this video, if you watch till the end, I will explain to you how I would have rewritten this show, because it does get worse as it goes on. So I will explain how I would have done it if I was a writer on the show, because so many of you have been asking me to do that, and I have an amazing theory which I'm so excited to share with you that will actually blow your mind. But all the girls have secrets. Some are worse than others. Their first message, the text, says, "I'm still here, bitches, and I know everything," from A, which makes the girls paranoid, because obviously this stalker, whoever it is, this person threatening them, is pretending to be Allison, and they don't know why. Everyone's trying to figure out who killed Allison, so they're all spending this whole season searching for a killer that doesn't actually exist, because, spoiler alert, Allison's not actually dead, so everyone's acting suspicious for completely different reasons. I will get into the girls' secrets in a moment, but we meet all of their families. Aria has a brother called Mike. Hannah seems to be an only child with this messy parental divorce cheating situation. Spencer's got a sister called Melissa and this brother called Jason, but she doesn't actually know that they're related because her father keeps sleeping with every woman in Rosewood and apparently not using protection. I don't know how that happens, but he's impregnating all these people, and for some reason Veronica's still with him. No idea. And then Emily is also an only child, and she's got a great dad, but he's always away. And then her mum's really annoying at the beginning, but she gets better as the show goes on. Girls start being blackmailed about the Jenna thing, which is something that happened that only Allison knew about, where basically Allison threw this stink bomb into the garage because she didn't like this girl Jenna, and it actually blinded Jenna. And then Jenna's step sibling Toby took the fall for it, even though he did nothing wrong. And the girls are very ashamed about their behavior and how they were bystanders to Allison's bullying. But the fact that someone knows about it now makes them very nervous, especially because Jenna's in Rosewood at the moment and she's still blind. Other than Emily, who basically develops this friendship with Toby for half of the season, everyone's against Toby. And the funniest thing about season 1 is Toby just being a nice guy, soft-spoken, and everyone being so incredibly suspicious of him and calling him dangerous when he's literally just existing. At homecoming, Toby ends up scaring Emily and chasing her down the hallway, which makes no sense because he had no intention to hurt her. But anyway, she runs away screaming. He takes her to the hospital when all he was trying to do was explain what happened with the Jenna thing and what's going down. But Emily's quite scared of him after that. But then the liars see this video, which is sent to them, with Allison at the kissing rock on the night she disappeared, saying, "I know you want to kiss me. I know you want to kiss me." And I love that line, "I know you want to kiss me." And Ian's there in the video. And they all freak out because Ian is dating Spencer's sister, Melissa. And Ian actually had this relationship with Allison, and he'd also kissed Spencer because he has this thing for underage girls. So the girls realized that their fear and their fixation on Toby was completely misguided, and what they should actually worry about is Ian. Noel and Aria go on a double date. Now, one of the secrets that Aria is being blackmailed with is the fact that she's in love with her English teacher, Ezra Fitz, and she's seeing him, and she should be interested in Noel, and he's really nice at the beginning, and he's sweet, and then they make him go all evil and sadistic, and then he starts going out with Mona and Jenna, who I guess corrupt him further, and he's never as nice as he was in early season 1, when he was more like normal douchey teenage boy, but not extreme douchey teenage boy, and then I don't know what happened to him. But I think Aria's secret is definitely the biggest, in the sense that it would actually potentially land Ezra in jail if anyone found out. So she's really paranoid. Emily's worried because she's closeted, and she's worried that A will expose her secret. And there's a photo of her kissing Maya that A's got, and she's so worried about that. And Hannah's got all sorts of secrets involving her mom, her eating disorder, her shoplifting, and she's worried about any of those things getting out. Aria's also worried about her mum finding out about her dad's affair. Spencer kissed Ren, who's her sister's boyfriend. Well, before Ian, the whole thing's a shambles. In episode 7, this is when this storyline kind of begins, of different animals or characters being introduced and then us never seeing them again. For example, Jenna's pet dog, Shadow, who makes a cameo and then disappears. The girls steal Toby's file from the psychiatrist's office when they're still suspicious of him, to try and figure out what's going on with him and his family and his relative Jenna. And that's when they learn that Jenna was actually sexually abusing Toby, which again, somehow there's no proper repercussions for Jenna with this, and that's very unfortunate. But yeah, the girls have this file, they don't know what to do with it, and rather than burning it or shredding it, they just toss it in the river, which makes it very easy for A to find it, and that was so dumb. This is kind of a pattern of the girls disposing of evidence in a really clumsy way, or getting rid of things they shouldn't be getting rid of. Then in season 1, they start becoming suspicious of Noel when he starts being all dodgy, but then even that theory is debunked because A does something bad to him with stolen test answers. They realize, why would Noel do that to himself? He can't be A. All of these threats from A actually bring the girls together again, because their friendship had disintegrated when Allison went missing. Ian disappears and then returns and actually marries Melissa. And that's when the girls discover the NAT club and the NAT videos. And the NAT club was the secret club of people like Jason who were filming underage girls. Why was Melissa covering this up? And also, why was this club making videos? Like, who for? I don't really get it. Very unexplored, very unclear. Now they're scared about Ian. Spencer is worried that Melissa will find out that she kissed Ian, because I don't think Melissa knew that. And Spencer's thinking, okay, this looks really bad because she knows I kissed Ren now, and she'll find out I kissed Ian too. But anyway, Melissa's like, look, I knew about the Ian thing. And this is around episode 16, they have this discussion. And then she quickly forgives Spencer, like, forget it, let's put the past behind us. I'm actually pregnant with Ian's baby anyway. Spencer can't say anything because she's so horrified and she thinks Ian's a killer. And then Melissa's like, oh my gosh, this is the part where you're supposed to say congratulations. She's so infuriating. As the liars put the pieces together, they realize that Jenna Marshall, who went blind because of them, still hasn't forgiven them, and so she's been paying Caleb to spy on Hannah. Now Caleb is Hannah's main love interest, who's this tech-savvy guy, and Hannah's got this romantic connection with him. So obviously Hannah's very devastated about this. She breaks things off with Caleb in season 1, and then she slaps Jenna. I have very mixed feelings about this slap. Slapping a blind person ethically questionable. Also, did Jenna deserve it? Yes. But also, did Jenna even have a chance of seeing it coming or defending herself? No. But then episode 19 comes up, and we know at this point that Ian groomed Allison. Now, people tend to overlook Allison's trauma because she was so manipulative and seemed on top of everything. But as we learned throughout this series, Allison was not only groomed by Ezra, okay, that's more questionable because he didn't know how old she was, but Ezra, let's say, Wilden, and this guy too. And we know that Allison kisses Detective Holbrook at the dance in season 5. So that's at least 4 people that had pursued Allison when she was underage. And even though she seems all badass and capable, that's actually very traumatizing, especially the Ian thing, because you know, like, it's not okay, and it's very easy to overlook because you're like, oh, but she's Allison. But no, she was still a child, and maybe that would explain why her behavior was so off the rails later, because she'd been taken advantage of. But anyway, Spencer knows about the whole Allison Ian thing. She thinks it's weird because how could Ian love Allison or care about her? It's just weird. So she mentions that to the police, and the chief of police says, Ian was a star athlete, popular guy dating a beautiful woman like your sister Melissa. Why would he risk all that for Allison? This is a legitimate thing that a police officer says when told about a predator. Like, what a stupid question. I totally overlooked this in the first watch. Who does that? This is also the start of the police force being completely, comically incompetent. Spencer's trying to warn her family about Ian being dangerous, but they're more focused on comforting Melissa than protecting Spencer. Now, Ian at this point is feeling very cocky and pleased with himself because he knows he's not going to get caught, so he's watching the girls and drinking cow's milk out of a glass. Why? God knows, he's not a baby cow, but it was very, very weird. And the girls are like, okay. And often there's scenes of him just sitting in the dark, kind of watching them, and they don't realize he's there, or saying things to Spencer like, you're in too deep, or watch out. And they're like, okay. Because of all the evidence and Ian behaving like a lunatic, the girls are very quick to go to the police when they find this trophy with blood on it, and they think that it was a murder weapon. So they're very embarrassed when it comes back with just rat's blood on it. And they realize that they're being set up to look bad, basically, in the eyes of the police, as Spencer's mother, Veronica, points out. Things are looking bad, but then Emily finds this key in this snow globe that Allison had given to her as this romantic kind of gift. Flashback to the Allison and Emily scene where they talk about this relationship they have. Well, it's not explicit, but the subtext is this relationship they have. And then Allison's like, how about forever? That whole scene. So Emily finds this key, which leads them to this storage locker. And it holds a flash drive with more of Ian's videos, which I guess meant that Allison was always planning on setting Ian up. But the videos incriminate almost everyone in the town, especially Ian, because it was clear that he was the one that took them all. They text Ian to tell him they have the videos as a way to trap him. And then basically Spencer is in this church, and then Ian gets her alone and corners her and tries to kill her. But before he can, Ian is pushed by someone from the top of the bell tower, and he says to them before he falls, what are you doing here? And he looks surprised as if he recognizes them, and then he falls and he seems to have died, but then the body disappears, and we end the season on a cliffhanger. As we find out later, the person who pushed him was actually Alison De Laurentiis, and so in that case he must have known that she was alive, because he's not like, oh my gosh, you're alive. He's like, what are you doing here? So he must have known that she was alive and on the run at that point. But anyway, that leads us into season 2. The girls are forced into therapy by their parents. I don't know why this didn't happen earlier, to be honest, but Dr. Sullivan's actually really nice. There's some very cringy therapy scenes, but I know that Dr. Sullivan had good intentions. Ironically, Dr. Sullivan is actually seeing A as a patient as well, but we don't know this at the time. It's decided that maybe the girls need some space and shouldn't hang out as much as they do, but of course the girls are still finding ways to talk to each other. Dr. Sullivan is finding out more and more about her patient A and kind of realizes what's going on, and so A has to blackmail her to keep her quiet, and so one day Dr. Sullivan just disappears. It's very suspicious. There's still this whole subplot going on of Garrett, the police officer, and Jenna, who still hates the girls, and every scene is just Jenna being ominous with the sound of her walking stick. I don't really mention Jenna that much in this video because she, in herself, she is just a gaping plot hole, because one minute she seems like she somewhat cares about the girls, like Hannah saves her from a fire and she's like, thank you so much for saving me, why did you save me? And then she's being actually mean again, and it's clear that she's on the A team, or she wants to hurt the girls and has her own separate agenda to hurt the girls. So it's extremely bizarre and makes absolutely no sense, and it goes nowhere. But anyway, she and Garrett are having this steamy relationship, and she thought that Garrett killed Allison even though he didn't, and so she wanted Jason to think that he'd killed Allison. Jason's Allison's brother, even though he hadn't, but she wanted him to think that and kind of tricked him into thinking that, because he doesn't really remember what he was doing on the night Allison disappeared anyway. All Jenna was trying to do was protect Garrett from being caught, and Garrett was just going along with it. Anyway, Ian is still missing, and the Hastings family continues to be the worst family ever to Spencer. They're implying that she was faking what happened with Ian in the bell tower, even though why would she do that? And also, he's missing, and why would she lie? But then Ian's dead body is found in Blind Dates with a suicide note next to it. It was this posthumous confession note saying he killed Allison, and Ian's death still to this day does not really make sense to me. Like, did he die when he fell from the bell tower and then the body was just moved and set up by A? Or did he like almost die and then A actually fully made sure he was dead and then left the note? Why? Or did he actually survive the fall from the bell tower, somehow walk it off, and then decide to kill himself, and then A found him and then planted the note, which also starts to seem a bit weird. But what we'll assume for now is that he fell off the bell tower, died, and then A moved the body and just put the note there to kind of distract everyone and make everyone think that Ian killed Allison. Also in season 2, Jenna and Noel are this creepy team. There's Jenna and Noel, Jenna and Garrett. I don't know what Jenna's doing, but I remember in that scene where they have that lock-in day at the school for anti-bullying, Aria comes into the school classroom and sees Jenna and Noel, because they're dating at that point, standing there in the dark holding 2 flashlights and being really weird and just standing there staring at her. It freaks her out, so she's like, okay, bye guys. And so she leaves looking for someone, and she gets up onto the roof, and then it's kind of creepy, so she decides to leave. But then she feels like someone's watching her and she freaks out, and so she starts climbing up this ladder, and then Noel appears and grabs her ankle, freaking her out. And so Holden, her friend, appears and does this fabulous karate chop spin move and saves her from Noel, to which Noel says, dude, what's wrong with you? I was trying to help her. How is grabbing her ankle and scaring her helping her? I have no idea. But then she runs off with Holden. I was just left wondering what the point of that whole scene was. And also, again, Noel's in the same category as Jenna of one minute it seems like he's scaring her, and then he's saying he's genuinely helping her, but he's not. We also see that Garrett and Melissa appear to be hanging out sometimes and having secret confessions and conversations in his car. Also, as a side note, why is Garrett always eating in his car? There's other places. I thought it was really weird that Garrett is this very corrupt police officer. Melissa knows that, and yet she is confiding in him, even though she knows that he was also a part of this creepy NAT club, and that he had also been arresting the girls for a murder they hadn't committed. So why would you be like getting cozy with him? And she even supports Veronica's bid to defend Garrett's innocence, knowing that he's not an innocent man, and knowing that he was one of the people to set the girls up for a murder. And this just reminded me of how much I dislike Melissa, because she will defend Ian, who's a pedo. She'll defend Garrett, who's a pedo, and she knew what was going on the whole time and wasn't saying anything. She's the worst sister ever. That being said, it's still too easy for the girls to throw her under the bus due to limited evidence. For example, in the Breaking the Code episode, that really bothered me a lot because Melissa is there in this video basically saying, where is she, and talking to Ian. It looks suspicious because it was on the night Alison disappeared, but it's not really damning evidence. It's not like it's video footage of her killing Alison, but the girls are like, we need to hand this in to the police straight away. And the police force is corrupt, so that could have very bad ramifications for Melissa. And also they haven't spoken to her first. They're just going to go right to the police. And Spencer's like, guys, she's my sister. Please give me some grace. Let me at least speak to her. And the girls are so pissed off at Spencer and kind of wanting to overrule her and what she wants and go straight to the police. They're the worst friends ever. They have so many secrets of their own and family secrets. Hannah had been very embarrassed for them to find out about her mum and Officer Wilden hooking up, who's very corrupt, and asked them not to judge. And here they are judging Spencer's sister. And this is the thing the girls do throughout the show, where they start chopping and changing who they're suspicious of and getting really angry, and whether it's Lucas, then it's Noel, then it's Melissa, and it could be in the space of one season. This season as well, yes, they start being suspicious of Jason and saying he seems dangerous, when just in season 1, they've been accusing Toby, the outcast, of being A and being dangerous. So this paranoia caused by whoever's stalking them makes them turn against each other and against other people very easily. Now, actually, in a discussion of this episode, I was recently featured on the We Are Liars podcast talking about it, which was so much fun. I'm so glad they invited me. So that will be coming out tomorrow. So if you're watching this video after it airs, it's probably already out. Season 2, we have this Brookhaven episode, and Brookhaven is only mentioned a few times throughout the show, but that bothers me so much more than Ravenswood ever did because of the pure insignificance of Brookhaven. One of the first times it's mentioned is when we're introduced to Alison's alter ego, Vivian Darkbloom, and this is when the girls start learning about who Alison really was and all the secrets she was keeping before her death. For example, her enjoying wearing this dark wig and red lipstick and pretending to be someone called Vivian just for the sake of having this alternate identity and pretending to be someone else that she wasn't. Hannah remembers that one time she saw this Vivian Darkbloom alter ego in a hair salon, and she was completely confused as to why Alison was there with dark hair. In the episode Unmasked even, they discover, because Mona told them, that Mona had seen Alison in Brookhaven spying on someone in her Vivian Darkbloom persona, and she'd asked Mona not to tell anyone or speak of it. And yet this had zero relevancy. So this whole Vivian Darkbloom subplot is a complete red herring. The name Vivian comes from Latin and it means alive or lively. And Vivian Darkbloom is also an anagram of the name of Vladimir Nabokov, who wrote the novel Lolita. Now, Lolita has all these themes of this like predatory age gap relationship thing, and it's so hilarious because, as we know, that's Alison's entire like personality at this point, is her being underage and dating older men. And I was like, oh my gosh, mind blown. This is going to be so symbolic. It means something huge about maybe Alison and Ezra being A, and oh my gosh, and I got so worked up, and it literally meant nothing. It kills me. Hannah has this friend Lucas, and she was also friends with him in season 1, and he was this sweet nerdy guy who had a crush on her. And yeah, he just is becoming increasingly troubled and aggressive and weird, and we find out he was a part of the A team in seasons like 2 and 3, but I think he left in season 3. But he'd also gambled all Caleb's money away, and he was worried about them finding out. And there's this scene in a boat where there's this confrontation between them, and apparently it was a bit of a mistake in filming. He was meant to come across more guilty and nervous, but because of who was directing that episode, they didn't really understand that, and they didn't have time to reshoot, so he comes across as positively dangerous and violent, but that was like a mistake, so that explains why that scene is so weird, and he never treats Hannah like that again. Season 2, episode 9, the girls discover that Jason, Alison's brother, has this dark room where he's been developing these creepy close-up photos of Aria sleeping, and so their natural conclusion is that A, Jason is a stalker, or B, he's obsessed with Aria. But later Jason says that those were actually Alison's photos that she took of Aria sleeping. Do we ever find out why Alison was so obsessed with Aria? No. The others are suspicious of Jason in the same way they were suspicious of Toby in season 1, because apparently these girls never learn. But Arya feels bad about this because she has some feelings for Jason, and even though she's seeing Ezra her teacher, she's thinking that Jason might be a better option, and there's this love triangle thing, but ultimately she ends up choosing Ezra. Why, for the life of me, would you choose Ezra? I don't know. Have you seen Jason? That man is stunning. I don't know what she was thinking, to be honest, but maybe it's for the best because he was part of the NAT club. The girls spend a very creepy night at the Lost Woods Resort, hoping to find something out about the whole Allison thing, or maybe the Vivian Darkbloom thing, and it's a complete waste of their time, although it was a very nice reference to the Psycho movie and Norman Bates and all that, so that was cool. Season 2 ends with the girls attending a masquerade ball in the hopes of literally unmasking who A is. They're told to be on the lookout for A dressed as the Black Swan. They see a Black Swan, and it's actually Melissa who was told to wear the Black Swan costume to distract them, but Melissa wasn't A, she was just told to wear the, I don't know what she was doing, and I don't trust a thing she says, because that happens a lot where Melissa's like, oh yeah, I was blackmailed, I was told to do it and I didn't know why I did it, it's not what it looks like. The irony is that Arya, one of the main characters obviously, is dressed up as the Black Swan with a dress that has a tutu silhouette, which is hilarious because that's literally saying she's A, even though she's not, but it's saying it. And also the Black Swan novel is about this dancer who has dissociative identity disorder, which tracks with a lot of things that we know about Arya. And as you can see, this show is excellent at setting up these fantastic clues and symbolism, but the real problem is with continuation and actually delivering on those things that it sets up. It will set up something incredible, build it up, put in the most phenomenally clever clue, and then do nothing with it. Marlene King, please, please. Melissa herself is a plot hole at this point, because why did she dress up as the Black Swan, really? Is she that obedient that she just does as she's told? No idea. As we find out later, because she said she was pregnant with Ian's child, she's not actually pregnant. She was just pretending to be pregnant. Who does that? And in season 4, there's this whole subplot of her trying to hide these masks. Why was she trying to hide the masks? Anyway, the finale of season 2. Spencer and Mona aren't finding anything useful. Mona has been blackmailed by A apparently in season 2, and she's been sent threatening messages about her shoplifting and blah blah blah, and she feels guilty about it and she feels bad, so the girls are kind of filling her in. And so they go back to the Lost Woods Resort together, just her and Spencer, and they discover A's lair, which is super creepy. And that's when, I think beforehand, Mona had offered Spencer some bubblegum, which Spencer didn't want. And then when she's in the lair, she finds the exact same bubblegum brand that Mona had just offered her. So Spencer freaks out and thinks, oh my gosh, is Mona A? Mona's this side character that has been friends with Hannah for a long time, which is not really a part of the main group, but she is sort of kind of friends with the girls at this point, but always an outsider. And she used to be loser Mona and bullied really badly by Allison, which the girls did apologize for, to be fair. They said that wasn't good of us. Well, one of them, I think Emily apologized, maybe not all of them, but they did feel bad, but they thought they'd move past it now, but clearly not. And so Spencer freaks out and tries to escape, but Mona hits her over the head and knocks her unconscious. And when Spencer wakes up, she's in the car, and Mona's like, look, Spencer, you're so smart. It would be a blessing to have you on the A team. As if Spencer would do, what a stupid suggestion. Anyway, the girls come to save her, they fight Mona, and Mona falls off the cliff, and then she's admitted into Radley Sanitarium. Dr. Sullivan comes back and diagnoses her and says that Mona's living in a dissociative state of hyperreality, whatever that actually means. I have no idea. But Mona is locked away, and there is this absolutely chilling, again, a Psycho reference, Norman Bates thing, again, where they zoom in on Mona's face and her thinking, these bitches don't know what's coming, this is only the beginning, and as if it would just be me that was out to get them. Dun dun dun! We find out that Emily's girlfriend, Maya, is dead, which is shocking because we meet her in like the pilot episode, Maya, and she's a really big part of Emily's coming out storyline and Emily being comfortable with her sexuality. And there were points where Maya left to juvie, or she disappeared for a while, or she would literally ghost Emily. But at this point, it had been like actually ages, and Emily was getting worried. And the reason why she hadn't heard from her is because Maya is dead. And also in the same final episode, we see that Jenna has gotten her sight back somehow, which is shocking because she goes to meet someone in a park and takes off her sunglasses, and we see that she can't actually make eye contact with the person. And she says to the person she's meeting, "I swore if I ever saw you again, I would give this to you." Now, it took me so long, so many rewatches to figure out what the heck was going on here and who Jenna was meeting, but I'm pretty sure it's her handing Shana a scarf. The reason why this is so confusing is because we haven't actually met that character yet. So I was like, is she meeting Garrett? Like, I don't know what's going on. The reason why Jenna was blinded in the first place is because Allison could see that she was going to become the next it girl and be hot and threatening and popular, and Allison didn't like it. So she tried to give Jenna a bit of a scare and basically bully her a bit, and the prank went out of hand and it blinded Jenna, and Jenna has never forgiven them for it, and so she still wants to hurt them. And I think that's why she was giving Shana a scarf, as this kind of like, because they were seeing each other, maybe it's this romantic gesture of like, let's go out and get the girls and let's hurt Allison. But something I realized through trying to figure this out is it made me wonder, did Allison actually intend on blinding Jenna or not? We never talk about this, but I thought it was Noel that had given Allison the stink bomb. In that case, had he known that it would be way too strong and that it would blind Jenna? Like, this whole thing, there's so much you could think about with this. And we know that Allison was pretty sadistic. But yeah, anyway, it seems like she's just plotting against the girls, basically. And as we know, even though Jenna successfully got her sight back, she doesn't want to tell anyone at this point, and she wants to keep pretending to be blind so that people underestimate her. And now, let's go into season 3. If you're enjoying this video, just subscribe and then click all so you get all notifications and you can see more videos just like this. But anyway, season 3. Emily is not coping well from her ex-girlfriend Maya's death, and she's grieving, and so she's developed a bit of a dependency on alcohol. And it's like the summer, so the girls are hanging out, having a sleepover, and it's this very cute homage to season 1 and the night Allison went missing. But the weird thing is that the same thing happens to Emily in a sense that happened to Allison, of like Emily going missing for a bit, and they find her standing at Allison's grave and it's been dug up, and Emily's being super weird. She has all these missing memories from the night that she needs to piece together. But the girls are heading into their senior year of school, which is about to be the longest senior year to ever exist. Like, the timeline of this show is another video, because that is hilarious how much happens in such a short space of time, like murders, kidnappings. Then the weird thing is that the A messages start again that night, which freaks the girls out because A is locked away in Radley. So who's sending them these messages? And they're very ominous, saying stuff like, Mona played with bones, I play with body parts. So they're like, sorry, who's this? Who is this? And so of course they're forced to visit Mona a few times at Radley to try and get some information out of her. But Mona is so out of it and drugged that she's not really able to tell them anything useful. Lucas has been acting weird since last season, so as you can imagine, he's their #1 suspect now, because he's acting even more aggressive and out of it, and he's even telling them stuff like Mona was just the tip of the iceberg, which obviously does not help his case because it makes him seem like he's hiding something. Hannah also spots Lucas visiting Mona at Radley, which is such a weird thing for him to do, since Mona had always picked on him and bullied him and said mean things to him. So it's like, why would you visit her? Then Melissa pretends to be the victim, which nothing's new here. And she's like, oh, I was only wearing the black swan dress because I had to. But it's like, why hadn't you told them that earlier then, you freaking lunatic? They visit Mona and Radley again, and she gives them some very cryptic clues and anagrams like, Miss Arya, you're a killer, not Ezra's wife, which that's so sinister, again pointing to Arya being A, but she literally called Arya Big A. Yes, I'm suspicious. But it also spells out Maya knew. Maya knew what? Maya knew how terrible the writers were? Maya knew that the show was going to have an awful finale and was trying to warn us? Who knows? Because apparently this was just another terrible red herring that meant absolutely nothing. As we find out through a tweet of Marlene King's, what Maya knew was that she knew who her stalker was and knew that her stalker was in town. which is so lame. Like literally that's so anticlimactic, because her stalker is some random dude, Lyndon James, who she dated and became obsessed with her and aggressive, and so he killed her. And he has no relevance to the main plot whatsoever. There's not even like a slight remote connection between him and A. He's just like this, he's there. But at this point, Emily's storylines have been getting so tragic that her Lyndon James subplot is actually quite interesting in season 3, because he befriends her and tries to manipulate her. And then when they're at this log cabin, he tries to kill her too, which was very traumatizing. And it's the only time where maybe it was kind of interesting, because a lot of the time throughout the show, Emily's given really bad storylines, as I talked about in my Emily deep dive character analysis video. But this happens a lot where, like, we have her dating Paige a bit in season 1 after Maya and that going bad, and then when that doesn't work, she jumps into the arms of Samara, this girl who was again way too old for her and shouldn't have been interested in her, and then she goes back to Paige again, and it's just very boring, like romantic subplots, which after a while feel like they aren't legitimate subplots. So it was kind of interesting to see her be almost stalked by Lyndon James and have that whole thing blow up dramatically in her face. It was quite interesting. I think he'd also kidnapped Paige as well and then tried to kill her, which was very traumatizing. Anyway, this new character appears, Cece Drake, who is incredibly significant, so please remember her. But she looks and behaves exactly like Allison did, and she's basically claiming to have been this super close friend of Allison, but that is so weird to the girls because Allison never mentioned her, and this is yet another case of them realizing how Allison was the worst friend ever because she never filled them in on anything.
Went through an intense couple weeks together. Dated her brother, Jason.
And Cece continues to be this very suspicious character who does a lot of things that Allison would have done. We find out that Lucas is on the A team and that he'd been blackmailed into it. And when he told Mona that he was done doing things for her, someone tried to run him over in an SUV. As we find out, it was Toby, Spencer's boyfriend, not Mona, that did that. This is another major thing, like mid-season 3, is we find out that Toby, Spencer's loyal, sweet, shy boyfriend, is on the A team. Now, I mentioned Toby in season 1 and I said he was an outcast everyone thought was A, which is true. And as the series develops, he plays adorable Scrabble games with Spencer and becomes her boyfriend and is for the most part very solid. But this is when it gets toxic because he basically joined the A team in season 3 to protect her. Yet it doesn't protect her, it only breaks her heart. And she's so devastated that at first she doesn't want to tell the girls because she wants to confirm her own theory to be true. And then she finds seemingly his dead body in the woods and has a mental breakdown because she finds a body in the woods with a tattoo on it that looks the exact same as Toby's tattoo. However, the body has a helmet on and she doesn't lift the helmet off to check the face, which pisses me off. Because why wouldn't you check? That's like the most important thing is seeing the face, because otherwise it's like a very cleverly laid trap by A to make you upset, which is obviously exactly what it is because Mona's there like, he's dead, isn't he? And this is the thing is, we don't know if we can trust Mona's intentions. Early season 3, Mona had been locked up in Radley and seemed really out of it as the original A, but she's let out around the Mona Mania episode and comes back to school, which set off the girls not knowing if they can trust her or not. And she'd even appeared in Hannah's bedroom in the middle of the night, which is so creepy, being like, oh, I'm so sorry, like I didn't mean to be A, which is messed up because she'd threatened them. She'd threatened Hannah about Hannah's eating disorder. She had hit Hannah with a car and could have killed her. She'd messed with medication. She'd taunted them about various things. She'd exposed nearly Arya's relationship with Ezra to the parents, like all kinds of things. And she has the nerve to come to Hannah like, oh, I've changed, whatever. She hasn't, but they don't trust her. Even when she's pretending to be normal and she's saying stuff like, I'm all better now, they're thinking there's no way she's all better now. And as we find out in season 3, it's totally a game and Mona's not all better now. And she's still very much on the A team working with Toby. And she's so conniving in season 3. It's sickening because she's pretending that maybe she isn't that bad or they can forgive her, and they literally can't. They can't because she is enjoying taunting the girls and enjoying the fact that they don't understand what's going on and there's someone else targeting them and they don't understand. And so It's just bad. Mona doesn't know who Big A is, who like the next A is. But she knows that someone new has basically taken over the game and she's happy about it. And it's 50 shades of messed up. But she was also the one who wanted Spencer to go crazy thinking Toby was dead. And so Spencer does go crazy thinking that her boyfriend is dead and had also been part of the A-team. And the thing is, she doesn't understand why he did it. So she didn't know he was trying to protect her. She just thought he hated her. So Spencer has a mental breakdown and is admitted to Radley Sanitarium. I forgot to mention earlier, there's a Halloween episode where they all go to a Halloween train and bad things happen to all the girls on the train. I think Hannah is dressed up as Marilyn Monroe and she gets felt up by someone and she thinks it's Caleb, but it's not Caleb. I guess it was A. It was either A or it was Wilden or Melissa, but why would Melissa fill up Hannah? So weird. Anyway, Spencer got attacked by someone on the train and she didn't know who it was because they're all wearing Halloween costumes, and luckily Paige saved her, but we don't know if it was A or Wilden or Melissa. It was one of them. Meanwhile, I think Aria dressed up as Daisy Buchanan and she got drugged by someone dressed in the Queen of Hearts costume and locked in a box and nearly pushed off the moving train. And when she was in the box, she could hear a woman's voice saying, "Push her off," or something like that. She knows it was someone in a Queen of Hearts costume with an accomplice, basically. As we later learn, that was Wilden and Melissa who were kind of blackmailed into doing it. And yet again, we hear Melissa's excuse of, "Oh, like, I didn't mean to," like, what? Oh yes, Aria was locked in the box with Garrett's dead body. Garrett was the corrupt police officer from earlier, and I'm pretty sure Wilden had killed him because Wilden, who was also a corrupt police officer, knew that Garrett was going to expose him, so he thought he'd better get rid of Garrett. I wish we got more information about Garrett's death, to be honest. Like, and his relationship with Wilden, that whole thing. In the meeting between Garrett and Spencer, when he was in jail before he was killed on the Halloween train, he'd said to Spencer that he knows who took the body from Allison's grave. Notice he says the body and not Allison's body, which means that he knows that Allison's not actually dead and there's a different body in the grave which was mistaken for Allison's body. So Garrett knew that the whole time. He'd also said, "Somebody you know well has you completely fooled. People lie, medical records don't." So it would have been so interesting to learn more about basically Garrett and the NAT club and all that, because it's such a shambles. But after Garrett's death and him being locked in the box with Aria, which is so traumatizing and kind of funny that she was nearly pushed off a train in a box, but anyway, that's when the girls realized that A has to be targeting the NAT club because Garrett's dead and Jason was also like in this elevator and the elevator broke and he fell down the elevator shaft, which was definitely set up by A. So, and he was part of the NAT club, right? So it's starting to look really suspicious. Obviously Ian's found dead. So it's like, okay, they're all being killed off.
Stop trying to pull everybody into every mess you bitches make for yourselves.
Back off.
Or what? You don't want to know, no.
Anyway, as I said, after this happens, Spencer thinks Toby's dead, freaks out, feels betrayed by him, thinks, "Oh my gosh, my boyfriend was on the A-team." She's admitted into Radley, has absolutely lost her mind, and when she's released, she's still not really herself. And so she joins the A-team as a double agent to try and figure out what's going on. That's when she finds out that Toby is still alive, and she's so relieved he's alive, but also furious at him for lying to her. And he's like, "I did it to protect you," which is bullshit. But anyway, she's on the A-team and she does some very dubious things, such as kidnapping Malcolm, Ezra's child, who Aria is meant to be like picking up from school, and Spencer faces no repercussions for this. But like, why would she kidnap Malcolm? Where did Malcolm go? The girls are suspicious of Spencer, but then they do this test where they have Hannah walking around in a red coat pretending to be A, and they're like, okay, Spencer will follow her and look confused if she doesn't know who this big bad person is. They know at this point that sometimes the big A will wear a red coat. So they're thinking maybe if Spencer doesn't know anything like us, she'll go following this person. And when Spencer does follow the red coat, they're like, okay, Spencer seems really confused. So she doesn't actually seem to know who Big A is. So she can't know everything. Spencer tells the girls that her initiation to prove herself is to deliver the girls to the Big A, who's also known as Redcoat, and to Mona. And she's meant to kind of give them over. Now, I don't know whether Mona and Redcoat were planning on killing the girls or what, but Spencer was told that that was her role. She was meant to throw this party at the lake house for them, but it wouldn't actually be a party, it would be like a trap for them. And she and Toby were meant to kind of do that together to prove that they were really sold with being on the A-team. Then season 3 episode 17, we witness a flashback to when Allison visits Toby in juvie, because she knows that he never blinded Jenna and that she'd set him up, and so obviously he's very, very mad at her. And I guess she wanted to set Toby up for it because he'd rejected her romantic advances one time. Anyway, when she visits him, he's being all aggressive macho man. The hilarious thing is that he's wearing a do-rag.
What is this?
As I found out later when I did some research, this was an accident. He wasn't supposed to be wearing it at all. Keegan Allen, the actor, said that they'd slicked his hair back with gel and he was wearing that around his head just almost as an accessory to keep it in place, but they forgot to take it out when filming. They filmed the whole scene, and then once they noticed the mistake, they couldn't be bothered to reshoot or they didn't have time. Meanwhile, Ashley Marin hits Wilden with her car. Love that for her. He was threatening her, to be fair, so fair enough. And he'd always been threatening her since like season 1. He'd always been an absolute douchebag to her. And she's always trying to protect her daughter, Hannah. So I don't blame her. But anyway, it was a hit and run. She left him there, which probably wasn't the best idea, but Jenna and Shanna kind of carry his body away. As we know, Jenna could do that because she's not actually blind. Oh, but then she gets blinded again, which is kind of funny because it's so tragic. Anyway, Spencer sets up her welcome home party at the lodge, pretending to be on the A-team, even though she's very much not on the A-team. It's a trap, and the girls are one step ahead for once because they know that Spencer knows, and Spencer knows that they know. And the A-team makes arrangements for A to fly in on a helicopter and arrive. Very grand entrance, I love it. When things start going down, the liars corner Mona. And while they corner her, Spencer and Toby sneak outside because they want to see who Redcoat/A is and what they look like. The reason I mentioned the Redcoat thing is because I guess this Big A got inspired by the Vivian Darkbloom persona and got inspired by how Allison would wear the dark wig and the red coat, and they thought, okay, I want to dress like that too, because A is always trying to, in a way, imitate and be Allison. So I guess that's why they start wearing the red coat as like a symbol of status or whatever. But anyway, they go outside to try and catch Redcoat. Toby gets hit on the back of the head and is knocked unconscious. That's weird because Redcoat is obviously in the helicopter, so you know there's someone from the A-team who knocked Toby out, and it can't be the Big A, it's someone else in the woods. Aria, Hannah, Emily and Mona are locked in the lodge together and it's set on fire. Again, it can't have been Big A that did that. It has to be someone else lurking around, like one of A's assistants. There's so much smoke, the girls pass out and they're dragged out of the lodge by Allison, and they see Allison leaning over them and they think they're actually hallucinating at this point, but then they realize they've all seen her, so that it can't have been a hallucination and she saved them. Now, this always confused me a bit, to be honest, this finale, in the sense of, was it actually Big A arriving in the helicopter, or was Mona just led to think that it was Big A arriving in the helicopter? The reason it makes it confusing is I know that sometimes Allison pretends to be Redcoat/A in order to help the girls. And she could have landed the plane because we know that she knew how to drive a helicopter. And then she obviously saves the girls from the fire, which alerts them to her identity. I don't know, maybe I'm just confusing it for myself and I'm just like making it more complicated than it needs to be, but I'd always liked the idea that it was all Allison's setup, basically. Yeah, maybe it's that Big A was actually arriving, to be fair, and then Allison was just in the area watching, and then she saw that the girls were in danger, and then she thought, okay, now's my moment, and she came to save them. And then Big A knew that something was up and knew not to let the girls see them and identify them, so they managed to escape before the girls could look and see who it was. Anyway, the girls quickly leave, I guess forgetting that Toby's been knocked out in the woods. They just forget about Toby, but okay, they leave. And then they're a bit alarmed because they see Wilden's car, even though they'd pushed it in the lake, but there's Wilden's car.
Guys, look at the trunk.
They go to lift up the boot and they see something inside it and they're like, oh my gosh, which leads us into season 4. Season 4, there's a dead pig in the trunk of Wilden's car. The girls are alarmed because they're thinking, okay, does A know that Hannah's mum killed Wilden? That's a pretty bad thing for A to know about. So the first half of the 4th season focuses on the aftermath of Detective Wilden's hit-and-run murder. Ashley, Hannah's mum, is made a prime suspect and arrested, understandably. The thing is, Ashley Marin didn't actually kill Wilden. It was A who shot him. It just maybe looked like Ashley killed him, but she just hit him with her car. In episode 1, it is revealed that Wilden was one of the people who wore the Queen of Hearts costume on the Halloween train and drugged Aria, and maybe was the one to attack Spencer, as the person who attacked Spencer was very muscly and physically strong. Mona's convinced the other one was Melissa, but the computer was hacked and wiped before they could prove it, and Melissa acknowledges that she was the other Queen of Hearts. But she said that she didn't know about Wilden's plan to assassinate Spencer and Aria until she was on the train. At this point, how do we know we can even trust her or believe her? A then texts Aria and Spencer saying that Melissa is not A material, which I beg to disagree, but okay. If this is the case, how come when Aria was in the box, we heard a woman's voice telling Wilden to push Aria off the train? It was clearly a woman's voice. The voice was saying, push, damn it. Makes me so angry. A mysterious woman dressed all in black arrives at Wilden's funeral, and we start to call her Black Widow. At this point, it's very confusing because we've got an A/Redcoat, and then we've got this Black Widow, and we're thinking that Black Widow is one of A's helpers, but it's not the same as A. So at this point, we're just questioning how many people are on the A team. Jessica, Allison's bereaved mother, comes back to town being incredibly suspicious, and then we have a bunch of terrifying jump scare scenes involving Jessica peering out of windows or leering around in corners, and she's not on the A team, yet she is literally the creepiest mum on the show, but okay. Jessica gives Allison's parrot Tippy to Hannah, and since Allison's been talking a lot, obviously, to her parrot before she disappeared, the parrot stored a lot of the information in its memory and has been reciting various things that Allison said. And so the parrot's saying all kinds of weird stuff, and Spencer somehow, with her extreme uber intelligence, discovers that the bird is reciting a phone number. The girls try to call it, resulting in a dead end. Season 4 is also where we meet Detective Tanner, and she is repeatedly accusing the girls of things that they didn't do. Yet another example of the incredibly incompetent victim-blaming police force. We also meet Detective Holbrook, who's a total creep and kind of tries to force himself on Hannah or hurt her. I don't know what he was doing, but she ends up hitting him with this metal bar. In episode 7, A crashes a car through Emily's living room window, nearly killing her mother. The girls find a strange mask with an address printed inside it in Allie's belongings. And so they trace it back to this guy called Hector, who makes masks. And this is the start of masks becoming quite a big deal in the show. Melissa's connection to these masks never made sense to me. In episode 9, Emily finds Jenna nearly drowned in the lake at a birthday party. I'm assuming it's because Jenna knew that Allison was that Allison was alive, and maybe A tried to shut her up, no idea. I mean, Jenna was pretty annoying, so it's a shame they couldn't finish the job. But Cece's still a thing, although we barely see her, but we learn more about the Cece-Allison friendship and how toxic and over-involved it was, and how they'd like pretend to be each other. It's super weird. There are also multiple revelations where in front of our own eyes, we see that Cece is a member of the A team, and she's either dressed in a black hoodie or she's literally watching and listening outside Ezra's apartment. Like, to our face, the show is saying Cece is on the A team, and I guess the show is hoping we just forget, but like, you can't forget something like that. Episode 11, Bring Down the Hoe. Aria starts dating Jake, who is still too old for her. There's this weirdly prolonged scene of them like dancing together at this event. Anyway, this was a really weird episode. At this Western themed hoedown, Emily and Spencer catch a glimpse of Redcoat. They follow her outside, this Redcoat A person. They get in the tractor, and then they realize that A is behind them, kind of worming around in the pile of haystacks in the back of the truck, sort of like and they're like, like, oh look, there's a lump in the hay. Let's go check it out. They're like, this is when the show is really unserious. Then they try to attack her. It's just hilariously pathetic. And they're like, they just pull it out and all they're left with is the coat. So somehow A has sort of shimmied out of the coat. Yeah, oh my gosh. Then we have episode 12 and 13 of season 4, which are these spooky kind of Ravenswood themed episodes where they go, I mean, we have a few neighboring towns next to Rosewood, which is obviously a fictional town, and Ravenswood is one of them, which is a slightly less infuriating town than Brookhaven, but it's still infuriating in that it's entirely supernatural, which I just hate for obvious reasons, because this is not a supernatural show. So we're introduced to just these supernatural elements of hauntings and Hannah's mother, Ashley, on Halloween being visited by this girl called Alice or something who claims that she's looking for her twin sister and is like this ghost child, and it's so weird. And sometimes they just insert these supernatural elements, and there's this psychic, Mrs. Grunwald, who wasn't... Anyway, Ravenswood is like this magical town, okay? And this is because they were setting up for this supernatural spin-off called Ravenswood with Caleb in it. So they were trying to make us excited for that, I guess. It totally backfired. But anyway, these are the spooky episodes, the Halloween specials, like episode 12 and 13. As you can tell, season 4 is when the show takes a dip. I thought seasons 1 to 3 were really solid, and we start going a bit nutty in season 4. But as pointless as Ravenswood was, the show never tried to imply that it was anything too important, whereas they really tried to frame Brookhaven as something important, and that's why Brookhaven is more annoying to me, whereas Ravenswood was obviously just a silly setup for the spin-off. To be honest as well, the Ravenswood episodes really creeped me out and scared me when I was younger. I remember being like, this is so scary. The girls see this magic show led by the great Charlemagne clown thing, and they're all distracted, and Arya's put in this box. Why is she always put in boxes? I don't know, but she's put in this box, and while they're all distracted, Emily is kidnapped and locked in a coffin and nearly sawed in half. On this moving conveyor belt thing, obviously getting a bit out of hand. The girls rush to save her, and there's 2 redcoats there and they don't know what to do. So Spencer runs off after one. With the other one, Arya performs this magical karate kick session. I guess she really improved from having this karate boyfriend, so that came in handy. It was truly supernatural, actually, some of those high jumps she was doing. But anyway, she kicks off the mask, I think, and the red coat like kind of starts to fall, and it's revealed to be Cece Drake. But then Cece's body just disappears somehow. Spencer's still following the other red coat, and in the process she finds this lair. Now, we had obviously Mona's lair in season 2, and we have an even creepier lair this time. I'll try and insert some footage, but it's this new A's lair, and Spencer's like, oh my gosh, did we just run into A's lair? Assuming it's A's lair. She's like, oh my gosh, this is so scary, it's so high tech. She's like, wow, this is really creepy, and there's photos everywhere. As we find out later, it's not really A's lair. They meet Mrs. Grunwald, this psychic woman. She tells the girls all this stuff about how they're not safe here, and it's all very cryptic. She tells them that she saved Alison from being buried alive, and that she pulled her out of the dirt because she sensed that something was wrong and went to save Alison, because that's such a cop-out, by the way. Like, who even is this weirdo? She tells them to get out of Ravenswood as soon as possible because they're not safe here and he is watching them. By he, I'm pretty sure she's referring to Ezra, Arya's creepy English teacher boyfriend. And she said that he is hoping that the liars will lead him to Alison. Definitely sounds like she's talking about Ezra at this point. But they don't leave straight away. Episode 13, Grave New World. They're still in Ravenswood. Arya, Emily, Hannah and Spencer all get dressed up to crash this Ravenswood Founders Day celebration. Arya looks like kind of a sexy Mad Hatter. Hannah's boobs look amazing in her dress. Like, it's such a good dress on her. Spencer's dressed as this ominous fur lady, which I love. And Emily looks like a sailor pirate princess, which I'm obsessed with. Now you know what they're wearing. Who cares? This is getting more and more out of hand. They crash the party. Now they know Alison could be alive and that they hadn't imagined her rescuing them from that fire. They're desperate to know what happened to their old friend. Ezra is there. watching them, and he's dressed as this World War I soldier, so they can't see his face. He's so creepy, by the way, and we know now that he's the one who has that creepy lair, and that it's not A's lair, it's his lair, which means that he has been obsessively watching the girls like a stalker. He's not, we're thinking he's A, but we don't know whether he's A or not. It's set up as his A, and if so, that would have been an amazing A reveal, but as we learn later, he's actually got his own stalker agenda, but he's not A. Kind of in the same way Lyndon James wanted to kill Emily, but he wasn't A. Hannah becomes separated from her friends, and she gets trapped in this creepy phone booth, and there's this cat and mouse game with A or Allison or whoever it is that ultimately leads to nothing. But anyway, she thinks she sees Allison through the steamed up glass of this phone booth before Allison is attacked by A. Spencer is then separately attacked in a greenhouse by Ezra, but she doesn't know it's him. Leaves her there unconscious and faces no repercussions for his actions, nor is this mentioned again. It is, may I emphasize, such a useless game of cat and mouse. I don't even know, this whole episode was pointless, but it's okay, it's all worth it, because then when they leave and they go home, they see Allison standing in Spencer's yard. She says, "Did you miss me?" It's so iconic, I almost forgave the episode for being so bad. But then she kind of disappears again. But they know she's alive, which is the important thing. They were going to speak to her more, but Ezra kind of appeared at that moment and interrupted them, which is really annoying, but it makes him look extra suspicious. Like he's trying to hunt down Allison. Like a total creep, because what would he want with Allison? Now, episode 14, Hannah brings a theory that if Allison isn't in the grave, whose body is in the grave, that means someone else's body is in the grave, so they start investigating. She also starts searching for girls who disappeared on the same day that Allison did, and something comes up, this girl called Sarah Harvey. They meet Sarah's friends, Claire and Tina. In episode 16, Shana, Jenna's accomplice, finds Emily and says that she knows that Allison's alive and Allison wants to meet Emily alone. And she's known this whole time apparently that Allison's alive. Shana confesses that Ali asked her to come to Rosewood to try and find out who's stalking her, who was trying to hurt her. Now, we don't know at this point that Shana's actually a traitor and doesn't care about Allison. And she'd actually already turned against Allison when she contacted her and was being nice to her, but Allison doesn't know that. Anyway, Shana takes Emily to the meeting place to talk to Allison, and Emily's so excited to talk to Allison. Obviously, Allison trusts her the most because we know they had a romantic connection. And then, because Spencer is a control freak, she turns up and ruins it, and Allison gets scared and leaves, and Emily's pissed, and so was I. Season 4, episode 17, Emily gets stuck in the school and attacked by A. She freaks out, and then her dad comes to save her and climbs up the building to protect her, and he's the best dad ever, but then he has a heart attack and nearly dies, and it's devastating. And this just made me so sad because obviously, as we know, he dies later during the time jump at some point, and I don't know, he was just the best dad in the show, and he's so protective, and I love him, and I don't want him to die. They get Allison's diary, and Spencer's reading Allison's diary entry where she's talking about board shorts, and she's talking about this guy that she had a crush on who was eating boysenberry pie. And that's when Spencer thinks, oh my gosh, did Ezra know Allison? Because she sees Ezra eating boysenberry pie. And she's like, okay, that's a really weirdly specific order. And the reason why that would be so suspicious is because obviously they knew Allison. Allison disappeared. And then after Arya returned from Iceland, I met Ezra like the day after, and they started dating, and he knew nothing about Allison, and why would he? So that's why it would be extra weird if he'd been lying to them this whole time and had known Allison, because he shouldn't. That would make him the biggest liar in the world. So they all start investigating, but obviously they don't want to scare Arya because, you know, he's their beloved English teacher and he loves Arya and all this, and they don't want to upset Arya. So episode 19, Spencer, Emily and Hannah go into Ezra's classroom and they find Allison's diary, which means he had Allison's diary, but he's altered it as if he already knew that they would find it and that they were onto him, which he is. Then a very sick game ensues where he's trying to distract them from being onto him. He knows at this point that Spencer is struggling a lot and developing an addiction to pills, and so he focuses on that, and the girls are all then concerned / weirdly angry at Spencer for having an addiction, and they're all doing this intervention scene which was terribly mishandled. And Spencer's like, guys, can you not see what Ezra's doing? He's trying to distract you rather than on him and the fact that he's the problem, there is such a big build up to a secret Ezra is keeping, which isn't revealed to the audience straight away, which is amazingly done and amazingly executed, by the way, which is why I'm so bummed he wasn't A, because the build up they couldn't have done better. But the girls are feeling more and more sick because they can see how attached Arya is to Ezra, but they know they can't trust Ezra. And Ezra keeps being weird, and one time his excuse to get Arya out of the house is that they need more chickpeas, if you remember this iconic scene. Then we see this zoom in of him looking in the cupboard, revealing there's already chickpeas there. I know. Eventually, Arya finds out that Ezra was only dating her because he was writing a true crime book about Allison and he wanted to be the one to solve her disappearance, and that he knew Allison and had dated her before her death, and he had conveniently forgotten to mention this to her when he first met her, which clearly wasn't a coincidence, and when they were dating. So he technically was using her to find out more about Allison, and that's who Mrs. Grumwald was warning them about. And Arya finds all of this out while she's in a ski lift 100 meters above the ground and is having a mental breakdown, which is kind of funny because even when she gets on the ski lift, she thinks he's not there and she's like, oh, thank God I escaped. And then she turns around, he's next to her and she's like, ah! Let's say he was writing a book, right? And he's just this avid writer who's just a total user and he likes writing books about people's disappearances. Why would he need a lair just to write a book? A high-tech lair? You wouldn't. Arya determines through Ezra's manuscript that he believes Mrs. De Laurentiis is A. In the finale, obviously at this point Arya's no longer with Ezra and she trashes his apartment out of rage, but the girls go to Philadelphia to meet up with Allison, and they are surprised by the person who shows up, which is Noel, who's yet another person that has known this entire time that Allison's alive. Why on earth did Allison trust Noel more than the liars that she was alive? I don't know. Why wouldn't she tell them she was alive first before Noel? Makes no sense. Noel Khan brings Arya, Emily, Hannah and Spencer to Allison's loft apartment where she's been hiding out. I don't know how she's been surviving for the last 2 years or what she's actually been doing with her time the last 2 years because they don't explain it. They finally, joyfully, can talk to Allison about what happened to her the night she disappeared. Throughout the seasons, they've learned some stuff. Like, we know she talked to Byron a bit the night she disappeared. We know that she, you know, had spoken to Ian and the Kissing Rock and seen her mum for a bit. But the chronology of things has always been very confusing and completely out of order. And now they finally get the juicy tell-all from her. Allison explains that she has been receiving, or she had been receiving, text messages threatening her from A, which was the first A, so that was Mona. And she wanted to have the leverage to finally end it. And that's when she finally did, because she found Ian's flash drive with all those incriminating videos where basically everyone in Rosewood has some kind of secret that's exposed in these videos. So to every person that she thinks would possibly in some way have a motive to hurt her, on the night she disappears, she goes to each of those people and she confronts them and she tells them that she has something on them, and so if they're the one threatening her, they need to back off or she'll expose their secret. So in the process, she makes a bunch of enemies. For example, Byron, she's like, I'll tell you about your cheating affair and blah, 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 if you're the one hurting me. So she drugs the girls on the night of their sleepover to make them sleep while she goes and does this. She sees Toby and she's like, blah, blah, blah. Then she sees Ezra and she kind of has this awkward conversation with him, Ian, Byron, Garrett, and Jenna. Those are all the people that she thinks maybe would have a reason to hurt her. And then she's all pleased with herself thinking, yay, I did it. And she goes home. After a day of good work, she gets hit on the head from behind. And her mother then buries her alive, not checking for a pulse, not realizing that she's actually alive. And she's trying to like call for help and she can't. But she knows her mum was protecting someone because her mum's crying going, what have you done? What have you done? So she's thinking, why would my mum bury me alive? Like, why would she protect my assailant? She's so upset, thinking, even if I do make it out of this, how can I go home because I can't trust my own mother? So then she's pulled out of the grave by Miss Grunwald, and Miss Grunwald goes to take her to the hospital. Ali bails, she tries to leave, and then she's intercepted by Mona, who she's bullied. And Mona's like, I can help you. And they go to the Lost Woods Resort, and then Ali's like, I need to leave town because I'm being threatened. I need to run away. Mona's like, great idea. So Alison leaves, and the last thing she sees when she leaves is Mona in the rear view mirror looking slightly suspicious and kind of watching her leave. Mona's probably delighted that she's got rid of Alison and Alison can leave town, because A, it means she successfully stalked her, and B, it means that she can take over and become the new popular Queen Bee now that Alison's not a rival to that. We need to understand, okay, well, who was the person in Alison's grave then? That was Bethany Young, a completely useless red herring plot hole who really is very unimportant considering what a big role she plays in the show. But basically, Bethany Young was a girl who was in Radley Sanitarium. She wanted to go and talk to Jessica, and she'd escaped from Radley that night. And she happened to be wearing the exact same outfit and the yellow top that Alison was wearing, so you could have mixed them up as they're both blondes. And she'd worn it because I think it was Cece, and Cece and Alison always had the same clothes, so she's wearing what Cece would have worn. So she's wearing it, goes to talk to Jessica De Laurentiis. Now, this is the crazy part. Both girls, both Alison and Bethany, are hit specifically on the back of the head with someone mistaking them for someone else. So, oh God. So they're Alison's hit on the back of the head, right, by someone who didn't know it was Alison. They were intending on hurting Bethany, but they didn't realize they'd hit Alison, right? And same with Bethany, is she was hit on the back of the head, but that person who hit Bethany on the back of the head thought that they were killing Alison, but they weren't killing Alison. They'd hit Bethany, and they didn't know that. Both get buried alive. We find out all this juicy information, although I don't think we found out the Bethany Young thing at this point because that was still confusing as to who was actually in the grave and why. A somehow attacks them, and Ezra miraculously appears to save them, and Ezra gets shot while A escapes and jumps from the roof onto another building like a ninja. And that's kind of where season 4 ends, on yet again a suspenseful note, leading us into season 5. Ezra is taken to the hospital. Apparently his act of saving the girls redeems him from being a stalker, so we all forgive him and everything's magical unicorn rainbows. So he's taken to the ambulance, and then one of the members of the A-team, which is Shana, is riding on top of the ambulance with him to the hospital, which makes perfect sense. So the girls are trying to trap A, but they get attacked by this A flash mob. Anyway, it makes no sense. They go to hide out in Ezra's family's theatre. Sometimes I forget that Ezra's like loaded and he's super rich. What was that? That storyline was in like season 3 where we find out Ezra's so rich on top of everything else he hid from Arya and their relationship, like him having an ex-fiancée. Cece appears conveniently in season 5, and her and Ali go to meet Noel, and they help Cece escape to France using Ali's Vivian Dark Bloom passport, because Ali looks so similar to Cece that they could kind of swap and pretend to be each other all the time. And at this point, I think it's because Cece's, what was she saying? She killed Wilden or something. She's like, I've got to leave. I've got to leave. So like, okay, go to Paris, go to Paris, go to France, whatever. Then, and that seems irrelevant, although there's this weird moment of eye contact between Cece and Mrs. De Laurentiis. It ends up being very significant later on, but you see them lock eyes and it's kind of awkward.
We have all of our resources committed to finding your daughter.
Ezra wakes up in the hospital very sick, and he tells Arya Shana was the one who shot him, and obviously she's a member of the A-team. Now they're a bit thrown by that because they thought Shana was on their side, but okay. Shana turns up at the theatre where they're hiding out with a gun and says that she's avenging Jenna. Like she's this weird fan of Jenna's. It's a terrible motive, but then she reveals that she's the one who set the fire. Luckily, Arya appears out of nowhere and knocks Shana off the stage, and Shana gets a knock to the head, which kills her. So Arya's casually murdered someone, which she gets over very seamlessly. Then they return to Rosewood with Allison with them, and obviously everyone's wondering what the heck happened to Allison, because apparently she's been missing or dead or something for 2 years. So rather than just tell the truth, which is I was being stalked so I ran away, Allison kind of freaks out because she's threatened by A. So she makes up this lie. I don't know what these girls never learn. They keep fucking lying all the time rather than telling the truth and thinking it's going to help, and not saying they're being stalked, which is the most obvious thing to do. Allison tells the police she was kidnapped, which isn't weird at all. Jessica De Laurentiis, her mother, is murdered by her twin sister Mary Drake. This is the thing that I hate, is in the show someone's murdered. Like, you don't even have a fair shot of figuring out who murdered them, because the character who murdered them, or the character we see, hasn't been introduced to the show yet. Like Mary Drake, we haven't actually met Jessica's twin sister Mary Drake, nor did we know that she had a twin sister. So how on earth were we meant to know that Mary Drake had killed her? Like, you're gonna think it's A. Like, at this point you think it's A, like, especially because A sends this message that implies that they were like burying Jessica, and they frame it like they're happy Jessica's dead, when in fact, as we find out later, A is devastated that Jessica De Laurentiis is dead. But the way it's framed is like, I'm happy, I watched her, I buried her, but actually they're not, and actually it was someone else that killed Jessica that we haven't met yet. Allison is actually very traumatized, but again, because she's Allison, it's very easy to overlook her trauma. But a lot of terrible things happened to her in the series. Like, we find out that when she was on the run, she started seeing this guy called Cyrus Petrillo, who she thought she would be safe with, and he ended up cutting her in her inner thigh. Mona is scared that Allison's back because she knows full well that she did the wrong thing and that she'd basically tortured and stalked Allison. And they have this whole rivalry going on. Rather than Mona just admitting that she was in the wrong, Mona decides to kind of bounce back and protect herself, and so she creates an army of people who were also bullied by Allison to kind of form their own clique. This is when the butchering of Allison De Laurentiis' personality begins. For example, her telling this lie that she was kidnapped when Allison was always known to be the master of secrets and manipulation, and she better than anyone should know that this lie is terrible and it will fall apart. This is meant to be someone who's a mastermind, okay? That's like good at deceiving people, that can pull it off well. How is this pulling it off well? Allison returns, she sets up her own kind of clique in retaliation to Mona's clique, and Mona confronts her, totally provokes her. So Allison slaps Mona, completely understandably, and Mona edits it together to make it look like Allison just slapped her unprovoked, which is so funny because you can clearly see there's been an edit to the video. And all the girls are like, oh my god, Allison, you're such a bitch, why would you slap Mona? Which is so dumb because, like, look at the video, it's clearly been edited. Yeah, there's two twins also introduced called Cindy and Mindy. After Shana's death, A has been pretty silent, surprisingly. But then A's big entrance is to reappear by exploding Toby's house with a message to all 5 girls: did you miss me, bitches? Iconic. So as soon as A reappears, that's when Allison's getting properly scared, and obviously she's thinking maybe A killed her mother, so they know A's not playing around. But then A, I think, tries to strangle her with a scarf, which scares her more, so she stays in town. Then Arya goes to Radley to kind of work there for a bit, and Eddie Lamb recognizes her and thinks he's seen her around before, and he works at Radley, and that is never explained. Thank you very much. Ezra asks Arya for confirmation that she saw Eddie as she was leaving Radley, and she says yes, in the parking lot. Why do you ask? Ezra says that Eddie Lamb for some reason had called him, even though he doesn't even know this guy, to set up a meeting, and they set up the meeting, and Ezra says, I waited for over an hour and he never showed up. Like, what even is the point of this plot line? I don't know. So at this point, Ali's kidnapping story starts falling apart big time, and then obviously that makes her look like she's lying about other things, right? So Detective Tanner starts questioning her about Shana's death, and why would you lie? Okay, and even Pam Fields is doubting Ali's story, whereas beforehand Ali's kind of living with Emily for a bit, and Emily wants to be able to trust her, but she just can't. And her and Allison are kind of back together and hook up at this point, but she doesn't know that Allison's really trustworthy. To ease everyone's doubts, Allison stages an attack with Noel Kahn at Hannah's house to make it look like an intruder's there, and to make them buy it, she also freaks out Ashley, Hannah's mum, because everyone needs to believe that actually they're in danger, so they can call the police and be like, oh my gosh, look, Allison's kidnapper is still out there trying to get her back, which is making it worse, obviously, because it's lie after lie. So seeing how much he's helped her, you would think that Noel really cared about Allison and just wants to do things to help her. But he has an incriminating audio of Allison, and Noel actually reveals that he's very much not on Allison's side, and he said he's keeping that evidence as insurance if she ever turns on him. So Noel doesn't trust anybody. Allison tries to bring in Cyrus to take the fall, basically, for being her kidnapper, which is a very underdeveloped subplot that doesn't really make sense. Following the Cyrus drama, the liars start to seriously consider cutting ties with Allison, because it's not even a joke anymore how much she's throwing them under the bus in the process, because obviously they're being forced to be strung along with this lie and pretend that she was kidnapped when they know that she wasn't. Yeah, Allison has this new group of minions, which is Cindy, Mindy, Jenna, and Sydney. And the liars are so lost at this point as to why Jenna would be on Allison's side when Allison blinded Jenna. But Jenna says that she's just scared of Allison and is just doing it to protect herself. Then Mike makes his return in season 5. He's Aria's younger brother. We'd seen him in, you know, bits and pieces, a bit in season 4, a bit in like season 1, and he was always a bit of like a depressed teen in season 1, breaking into people's houses and doing dumb shit. But when he returns in season 5, he's suddenly incredibly hot. I wish they'd given us warning. Aria's brother Mike is now dating Mona, Aria's ex-stalker, which is hilariously messed up now I think about it, because obviously he's giving Mona free reign into Aria's home and Aria's bedroom, and Aria's just randomly finding Mona in her bedroom, and she's like, what the fuck? And he just doesn't even seem to care. He's like, yeah, people change, Aria, like, what are you gonna do about it? Now, my toxic trait is that Mike and Mona are probably my favorite couple in the entire series, and I think they were literally so cute, and I think they were adorable. Shame me, blame me, I don't care. I said what I said, and I meant what I said.
I'm gonna get a refill. Want something?
No thanks.
In the episode No One Here Can Love or Understand Me, Mike, Mona, and Aria are at the cinema, and Aria's being all broody that Mike and Mona are together. And so as the film is showing, Aria whispers something into Mona's ear. Mona looks incredibly upset and goes to the bathroom, and then she tells Aria, you know where the knife is and you know exactly where to stick it, but we never find out what it was that Aria said to Mona that made her cry. Hannah becomes an alcoholic, and so does Caleb. And then there's this horrendously cringy intervention scene with Toby and Caleb, where it's meant to be the bros and Toby being like, what's going on with you, man? Why are you an alcoholic?
Don't make such a big deal out of this, Hannah. Hey. So, Hannah says you're having trouble sleeping. What's the deal with that?
He's like, why? I've been to Ravenswood before. What happened to you in Ravenswood to disturb you so much to become an alcoholic? And Caleb's like, you were just a tourist, man. I lived there. Anyway, then they're suddenly not an alcoholic anymore. Spencer goes to London for an Oxford interview, which obviously has its flaws and logic. Then they try to fit in as many British stereotypes as possible, including her having a fling with a guy called Colin who's British and likes crumpets.
In London, we have clouds perpetually hovering over us. Right, how about a drink to warm up? I'll make a brilliant hot toddy.
Also completely unimportant, but I found this really funny, so I'm including it. Spencer gets kicked in the face by a horse. I don't know why. They're still mad at Hannah because Hannah's really struggling to deal with the return of Alison because Alison had always bullied her in their friendship. Hannah says, you know what, last time I checked it was still my bedroom until somebody else invaded it. Even the doorknob smells like her. And Spencer says, why were you smelling the doorknob? 10 out of 10 dialogue. So then it's revealed that Bethany Young is the girl in Alison's grave, and some of the attention switches to that. And Eddie Lamb starts this investigation off by dropping off a drawing at Ezra's door. The drawing was done by Bethany Young when she was in Radley and features Mrs. De Laurentiis being stalked by a monster in her yard. And there are multiple disturbing pictures of Mrs. De Laurentiis being a monster with demon horns or whatever. So Bethany Young really hates Mrs. De Laurentiis, and we find out that Mrs. De Laurentiis was having an affair with Bethany's father. Yeah, like I said. Melissa, Spencer's sister, leaves town, but she gives Spencer a video explaining everything, which is so stupid because digital footprint is a real thing. But she's explaining that she buried Bethany Young, thinking she was Alison, thinking that Spencer had been the one to kill her. So she's thinking, Spencer killed Alison, I need to bury the body. And as we find out, actually it was someone else that hit Bethany Young in the back of the head, probably Mona, because she was A at that point, trying to kill her, right? So Alison, at this point, how did they forgive Mona? No clue. But Alison volunteers for a polygraph, and at this point the girls are really freaking out because they know this lie is spiraling out of control, and they'll go down as like obstruction of evidence because it's a crime to lie when you know the truth, right? So they ask Mona for help because they're getting scared of Alison, and they're starting to think that Alison is A. Actually, it's just A setting them up to think that Alison is A. But at this point, the show handles it so well of Alison being fucking terrifying that you don't know what's true and what's not true, because she's even turned against Emily. So that doesn't turn out so well for Mona in the episode See What Happened to Mona, because basically Mona had a whole master plan to like basically take Alison down once and for all and fake her death so everyone would think that Alison had killed her. But it goes terribly wrong, and it looks like A has actually killed Mona for real, because they come into Mona's house and there's blood everywhere and Mona's gone, and they find video evidence of someone in a mask with blonde hair beating the crap out of Mona. So Mona's body was not found, but it was classified as a homicide. And then at the end of the episode we see her pale, death-like corpse in A's car. But thing is, there's a Jesus ornament on her, which really gives away that in fact Mona may not be dead and will resurrect herself or make a return or whatever, because it's very symbolic, right? But anyway, they're all memorializing Mona. Her mum's devastated. Her mum slaps Alison. It's really funny. And then Mike says that everyone's memorializing Mona and making her the saint, but she wasn't a saint. And Mike, who's obviously upset because it was his girlfriend, he says that he's sick of being told how sweet and smart and nice Mona was. Quote, she wasn't nice. Anyone can be nice. I'll never meet anyone like her, ever. So cute because it's so honest. Aria then asks Mike if maybe sometime he can tell her about the real Mona, the Mona he knew. And he's like, yeah, maybe I will. So cute. And it just shows that as sadistic as Mona is, even we as the audience never got to see that real side of her that Mike saw. So the liars immediately think that Ali is responsible for Mona's murder, since Mona had been helping them take Alison down right before she died. Unfortunately, this is just a setup by A, so it leads to Alison being arrested, which the liars help with by preventing her from escaping. And Alison's like, you guys watch, A is setting me up, and the girls don't believe her. The liars go to Mona's house, and all they find is a note with a series of phrases including chandeliers, rituals, which is an anagram for Charles De Laurentiis, which implies that maybe Mona had figured out that A is Charles De Laurentiis. Kenneth and Jessica did have a child called Charles, who they sent off to Radley, and Jason was always convinced he had an imaginary friend as a child, but he was told he was crazy and all this, but it actually wasn't an imaginary friend. He legitimately had a brother called Charles that he was told to forget because apparently Charles was disturbed. In a lot of season 5, Aria is trying to convince her brother Mike to stay out of Mona's trial and not get himself in trouble. But Mona and Mike had talked a lot, and Mike's pretty sure that basically A double-crossed her, or someone double-crossed her, because now she's dead. He wants to speak out about the truth about A and say that Mona was trying to stop A, but Aria's really worried about A then threatening Mike to try and shut him down, which is always what A does, and that's what happens. A threatening ox tongue is delivered to their house, and then what's terrible is Mike is attacked by A in the woods and pepper sprayed and tied up, and Caleb and Ezra find him. Now they know that Mike's being threatened because he knows the truth, so they go to Detective Tanner to say he was attacked. Detective Tanner doesn't believe them and thinks they've made it up, and says it's pretty weird of you to take a photo of your attacked friend rather than your first instinct being to help him, which is such insane victim blaming. It's insane. The first thing you should do is take a photo of the evidence. Allison is offered a plea deal to name her accomplice, who the police believe to be Hannah. She doesn't end up taking the plea, but Hannah is arrested anyway, and they find Hannah's blood on Mona's clothes from the storage locker, and they realize that basically, indeed, A is setting them up to all go to jail. And at Allison's trial, Leslie Stone, this rando, shows up as a surprise witness saying all this bullshit, and so the liars are arrested. And it's really sad, really tragic. You think they're going to be in jail for life for killing Mona, and A got exactly what they wanted. But then the crazy thing is, at the end of season 5, the 4 liars are being driven somewhere to be separated, but then their van is hijacked and they're gassed. And this is, dun dun dun, the dollhouse. A's master plan was to kidnap the girls. They're kidnapped. And this was the craziest, the most extreme thing that A has ever done. And this is when you know that A is on a whole other level to Mona. So, welcome to the dollhouse. This deserves its own section because it was so iconic. Each girl wakes up in a replica of their bedroom, and it's like they think they're at home for a second, but they're locked up because they look out the window and they realize there's just concrete there. So they're in some sort of underground bunker. It's insane. So they're let out and they walk down this concrete corridor to an exact replica of Allison's living room. And it's like all these auto-generated voices telling them what to do and where to go. Like, so it's Mona there with blonde hair in an Allison mask playing the piano. So she's been held captive by A for almost 5 months, and she's acting like she's been brainwashed into actually thinking she's Allison. Like, being locked up alone for so many months has driven her insane. And they're shocked that she's even alive, but as we find out later, she was basically drugged and paralyzed by A, so she seemed dead, and then thrown in the car and kidnapped. So the girls are forced to do all these things they don't want to do, forced to be like A's living dolls, and they're forced to attend this crazy fake prom in the dollhouse that apparently Charles is there attending somewhere. And Spencer then figures out from a set of children's blocks that A's name is Charles, and she kind of rearranges it in her head, and she's like, oh my gosh, Charles. So the girls then escape outside the bunker because they try and create this distraction at this prom, but then they see that they can't escape because the bunker's surrounded by an electric fence. And so to punish them, they're still trapped, and A leaves them outside for 2 days without food, water or shelter, and then they're let back inside. So yeah, season 6, let's get into it. We only get 2 episodes in the dollhouse, which is, I mean, it should be a federal offense, to be honest. We needed at least half a season, but we're still in the dollhouse, and the girls are getting obviously psychologically tortured, and A gasses everyone except Mona, locks Mona up in a hole because A's angry at Mona for kind of rebelling, and the girls wake up naked under a sheet in this fake morgue. The girls then return to their rooms to see their surprise, and they're separated for 3 weeks, doing who knows what, because we never see, we're never told. All we know is that they're torturing each other, or they think they are, but they're not, but they think they're torturing each other or giving each other electric shocks. We hear them screaming, and we know it was really traumatic and that they thought they were hurting each other, but we never actually saw what was happening to them for those 3 weeks. Great. Meanwhile, Alison's murder conviction is overturned and she's sent home because obviously the police feel guilty. Now they realize that the girls have legitimately been kidnapped and so they can't have actually done anything wrong, including Alison. So they think it's Andrew Campbell, this random guy Spencer flirted with, but he's clearly being set up by A as some kind of red herring distraction. Alison is then filmed outside her house basically begging A to return her friends to her. Now you wouldn't know this, but Noel was actually in the dollhouse at this point helping A. Don't know why he would do that, but he's like pouring fake blood everywhere and very much knew the girls had been in the dollhouse the whole time and did nothing to help, so that's really shitty of them. And the question I have is how long A was planning on keeping them in the dollhouse? Forever? Because the only reason they got out was because they escaped. Anyway, Spencer tells the girls that Charles is a De Laurentiis and so they absolutely have to get out of there, and they know this for sure. So they break into Charles's vault and set it on fire, which is a terrible idea considering they haven't actually escaped yet. And then they're like, oh shit, it's spreading too fast. And I'm like, yeah, that's how fire works, babes. So they rescue Mona from the hole and break out of the bunker, and luckily at this point Ezra and Caleb and what's her name, Alison, have managed to track them down because they were kind of onto A the whole time, like trying to rescue the girls. And then they discover that there's been another person in the dollhouse the whole time, Sarah Harvey, that girl who went missing the same day Alison disappeared. And it seems like poor Sarah Harvey's been kidnapped and tortured by A and locked down there too. But what we don't actually realize is that she kind of wants to be there and has been helping the whole time, and she wasn't actually being tortured and locked up. We're introduced to her. I like to call her Shower Harvey because she's always talking about showering, but she goes to live with Emily for a few weeks, and Emily's kind of looking after her for some reason. We have this horrendous one-liner from Shower Harvey. Did you think I looked feral? Like, she's the worst character ever. Anyway, I'm quite traumatized from everything she says, and she's the worst actress. But Mona obviously comes back home too, all traumatized after the kidnapping, and then Mike kisses her and it's really cute, and then we never see another scene of them together as a couple ever again, which makes no sense. A has obviously still found a way to keep track of the girls, knowing they may escape one day, which is that A had actually put tracking chips in the girls' necks, and the girls thought it was a great idea to perform surgery on themselves on their actual necks and cut the chips out. Charles gets really mad when he finds out that the girls had removed their own chips from their necks because it was his way of tracking them. Charles lures Jason to come and meet him for his birthday, and then the girls crash the meeting and ruin it, and then Charles gets away. So that's great. I think Toby was high at that point, so he couldn't help. Mr. De Laurentiis comes clean at this point to Alison and Jason about the family's connection to Charles De Laurentiis. Yeah, I said it happened earlier, it didn't. Scratch that. He does it now. This is when he actually comes clean and tells them, and this is when the audience finds out about it, revealing that Charles is actually their older brother who he and Jessica sent to Radley because of his troubled behavior. So Jason was basically gaslighted for most of his childhood. Mr. De Laurentiis knows he was a terrible father by basically abandoning Charles, and so he receives a card from Charles where Charles announces that he's coming home for his birthday in this really sinister way, which really horrifies Mr. De Laurentiis. So he's like, we need to get out of here, like we need to escape, and Alison's like, what the fuck's wrong with you? We're not leaving town, all of this. Meanwhile, Caleb's protective nature is actually way too much because we find out that he has put a tracking device in Hannah's car, which is not okay because obviously Hannah's sick of feeling like she's under surveillance 24/7 anyway. Meanwhile, Spencer has a very vivid dream slash hallucination of a girl dancing and imitating giving birth in a bathtub at Radley. I thought this was significant. It meant nothing. Meanwhile, the girls are told they can't have a prom, so they decide to throw it at Spencer's barn instead. And then they're looking on their phones, kind of making fun of how everyone's dressed at prom. And they see a photo of Alison in the background at prom, and she shouldn't be at prom. She's not allowed to go. And they realize that she's there to meet Charles by herself because she's a dumb bitch. So they're like, okay, we need to go and save Alison, because Alison, for some reason, is doing this infuriating thing of almost siding with Charles. Like, I know he kidnapped you guys, but he is my brother and I feel bad, and he seems so sweet in all the childhood videos and I never got a chance to know him. So the girls go to save her. Then Alison's kidnapped by Charles, of course, because she's dumb. And she wakes up in what is clearly a room at Radley in this high-tech lair with projecting video screens and high-tech moving walls. The liars' mums obviously want to come and save them because they're always protecting them. They're on high alert, and the girls had been threatened by A even after escaping from their kidnapping, so they're very scared about A coming after them, and the mums know it, so they're very much trying to look after the girls and check up on them and make sure they're not going to get kidnapped again, right? But the mums can't help them in this case because someone on the A team locks them downstairs in Jessica De Laurentiis' basement, and we never learn how they escape. The girls rush to Radley to try and save Alison. They can't get into the same room where Alison is, but they're kind of watching everything unfold on this horrendous high-tech projection screen. Then A turns around to face them in a black hoodie. So Cece Drake is the next big A. Wow, that's so riveting. So she is the same person as Charles. Cece Charles, same thing, right? Charlotte Charles, could be the same. So she tells her story and says that she is actually transgender and was born as Charles. So our first transgender person is a villain, lands super well. So she says she accidentally almost drowned baby Alison in a hot bath. And so rather than the parents helping her, they thought she was sadistic, which she was a bit, to be fair. So they dropped her off at Radley and just abandoned her. Which meant that Jason, his whole childhood, was told that his brother was actually an imaginary friend who he had to forget about. So this means that Jason had not only kissed Melissa, not realizing they were related in season 2, but now in season 6 we know that Jason had actually dated Cece, not knowing that she was actually his sibling. Find out that Charles spent his whole childhood in Radley and was taken out one day, and they have this fake funeral for Charles, but actually Charles is alive, and then obviously becomes Cece. Charles/Charlotte is back in Radley and kind of happens to meet Mona, and so Mona tells Charlotte all about the girls in the game, and she's all drugged up, so she doesn't remember who she's talking to, but she's obviously like, oh my god, I love torturing them, it was so much fun. Now Charlotte's obviously lonely, bored, looking for meaning in her life, and she said that she got really like excited hearing about all these crazy games that Mona played in the girls, and then Mona said that the girls seemed happy that Alison was gone, and that really pissed Charlotte off because obviously Alison is her sibling, and so she's like, how dare the girls be happy Alison was gone? This is a pathetic motive, obviously, because the girls weren't happy Alison was gone. They were devastated. Even though they disliked her, they did love her at the same time, even though she was a bad friend, and they were very upset that something had happened to her. They weren't happy she was gone. Cece is like, okay, let's punish them. This seems fun. I'm going to avenge the sister I never knew. And so she takes over the game and becomes the big A. Now, obviously, when she was given a passport and went to France, she tried to escape the game, but she admitted the game is like a drug. And so it was so addictive, she had to come back and keep playing, which, why would you come back? And why would you think that Rosewood is more exciting than Paris? Truly baffles me. She kind of kidnapped Sarah Harvey, but Sarah wants to be there. Sarah, whatever, basically becomes her accomplice and is totally evil as well. They're planning to blow up Radley, and actually Sarah's there the whole time as Redcoat, helping her with this bomb device, and her plan is to kill everyone. She's also drugged her own father, Kenneth, and Jason, her brother, and left them lying there half paralyzed. A bit pointless to torture them if you're planning on killing everyone and yourself, but she reveals to Ali that she was the one who hit her with a stone because she was actually trying to save their mother. She thought that Alison was Bethany Young, and she thought that Bethany Young was trying to kill their mother. So she was trying to help by hitting Alison on the back of the head because she thought it was Bethany, and she was absolutely devastated when she realized that she'd hit her own sister because it was never her intention. And as you can imagine, her mum, Jessica, was absolutely furious at her. She reveals everything and now is prepared to kill herself. And so the girls race to try and stop the bomb from being detonated. And then when the bomb is like, okay, it's not gonna kill them or anything, Cece runs to the roof to try and kill herself, and the girls convince her that, you know, she does have a place in this world, and please don't kill herself, please don't leave Alison all alone. And so Cece ends up stepping down from the roof and deciding not to kill herself, and the girls are being weirdly empathetic, and they say, we understand why you did what you did. I'm glad they do, because I am completely confused. So she's sent to Radley to recover, and it ends for a while with the girls going off to college and Allison staying behind to look after Cece, her ex-torturer. Don't know how Allison transitioned from a sociopath to a dedicated sister and carer, but okay. And the episode kind of ends with a time jump to 5 years in the future when the girls are all grown up. I guess they had to age them up because the actors were growing up too fast, but in this flash forward, we see the girls returning to Rosewood High saying, Allison, we've come back for you. Allison's a teacher and turns around looking shocked to see them, and the girls say, Allison, he's coming for you. And Spencer's like, never mind, he's here, it's already too late. And Allison looks terrified. So we're really excited to find out who's after Allison and what's going on. And this kind of leads us into the season 6B post time jump. So 6A, girls are young, 6B, girls are grown up. Very jarring. So Allison has been petitioning the court to have Charlotte released into her care, and a court date is set, and she sends the girls a letter begging them to come and help. Spencer's in politics, Hannah's in fashion, Aria's in publishing, and Emily bartends and I think left uni and didn't tell her parents. So the girls are summoned by the court to appear, and they all root for Charlotte's innocence and safety and say yes, send Charlotte home. Aria's the only one with common sense to say no, Charlotte tortured us and I don't feel safe with the idea of her being released. However, Charlotte is released and Allison's delighted to have her sister and her family whole again. Then Charlotte is brutally murdered, and the girls are really confused about who did this, because then they start being sent threatening text messages from a final Big A, except this Big A, rather than seeming happy that they killed Charlotte, this A seems very upset and angry that Charlotte is dead, and it's basically like, I'm going to keep torturing you until one of you fesses up. And so this A's motive seems to be that they loved Charlotte and they're trying to figure out who on earth killed Charlotte, and they're convinced it's one of the liars that did it. Now, the girls are all suspicious of each other for various reasons, including Aria and Ezra, who are looking very suspicious, and so Hannah tries to remove this Radley footage of Aria and Ezra being somewhere they shouldn't be, not knowing that the footage was backed up, and now she's just deleted footage that she shouldn't have deleted, which was really stupid of her, but she was trying to protect Aria. And there's a whole subplot of them being convinced that maybe Ezra killed Charlotte out of trying to protect Aria. And the girls now are getting drunk at the Radley like the night before Charlotte dies, which has been made into this refurbished hotel, which feels a little bit like, I don't know, just wrong somehow to make a mental hospital into like a fancy hotel, but whatever, we'll go with it. So while at Charlotte's funeral, the Lies are stunned to see Sarah Harvey show up, and they all feel really guilty because Sarah Harvey's got these gloves on, because when they kind of punched her when she was going to detonate that bomb, she kind of hurt her hands and ruined them. And this is meant to be a recreation of like the Jenna thing, where they feel guilty over having hurt someone, but it's like the shittier version of the Jenna thing, because they did nothing wrong and it's Sarah's own fault that she was touching a bomb. Sarah, let's just call her Sarah. It was Sarah's own fault that she was touching that bomb, and so it's nothing the girls should feel guilty for, and it was completely on Sarah. But anyway, they like feel bad. No, it's Sarah, isn't it? Girls feel bad basically, and so they shouldn't know. That's the annoying thing, is they shouldn't feel guilty because Sarah was a total lunatic and is still behaving like this twisted loser in season 7 and 6B. So as they're leaving the funeral, Lorenzo tells them that Charlotte was actually murdered and her death was made to look like a suicide, and tells them not to leave town because they need to be interrogated and stuff. Then Detective Tanner accuses the girls of killing Charlotte, and she tells them that there have been no murders for 5 years until all the girls came back to Rosewood, which therefore means they're responsible somehow. I have no idea. The victim blaming is insane. But this new A is calling themselves AD, and this AD is texting them differently than all the other A's have in the past, with a ton of completely over-the-top emojis, which by the way makes it so cringy season 6B onwards, because every time they get a text from A, I laugh, because it's something like, you bitches, you're the worst, I'm gonna take you down, with like a tongue, devil, tongue out emoji, thumbs up, like it ruins it for me. Allison marries Charlotte's doctor. The doctor ends up being demented, and it turns out that he was actually in love with Charlotte before he was in love with Allison. Allison starts hallucinating her dead mother and Wilden and thinks she's losing her mind, so she checks herself into Welby, the psychiatric hospital, when in fact it was her evil doctor husband trying to convince her she was crazy and dressing up in masks to make her think she was hallucinating. Now, Ari and Ezra, now they're kind of grown up, are writing a book together about his presumably dead girlfriend, Nicole. This is sort of a thing of Ezra capitalizing off his ex-girlfriend's disappearances and writing books about it. They look really suspicious for the murder. Emily donates her eggs to get money to finish school, but they end up being stolen, and then Allison is impregnated with Emily's eggs because apparently A is like the biggest shipper of this couple ever. Hannah's kidnapped also. Yeah, it appears that Jessica De Laurentiis is caught on video by Caleb's surveillance, but it turns out that she's Mary Drake, Jessica's twin sister, the same one who killed Jessica, a character we had no idea that existed until just now. I'm getting really sick of twins at this point. It's revealed that Charlotte and Elliot, Charlotte's doctor, were in a relationship, and that Charlotte was in fact Mary's daughter and therefore Allison's cousin as well as sister. And now the family tree is getting even more convoluted. And so I'm pretty sure Elliot wants to avenge Charlotte's death, and he thinks that Allison did it, but why would she kill her own sister? She wouldn't. She was rooting for her release. This gets us into season 7. Season 7 kicks it off with a bang, as obviously Hannah's kidnapped for some reason and the girls are trying to save her. The liars are struggling to kind of hide Archer's murder as well, because he like dies in this, Archer Dunhill, but I'll explain that later. Yeah, they're given a deadline to hand the real killer of Charlotte over to AD or Hannah dies. That's the idea. So Hannah knows that she's going to die, and the girls are thinking, well, none of us killed Charlotte, so how are we meant to help do this? And they're taking a really long time. Luckily, Hannah manages to save herself. She has this very vivid dream where Spencer is there, except Spencer doesn't have bangs anymore. It looks like the old Spencer. This is extremely important, keep in mind. But anyway, in this dream with the Spencer, it feels very weirdly real. And Spencer says, hey, I'm going to help you escape. And if there's a way in, there's a way out. Truly mind-blowing. Thank you, Spencer. The escape is aided by Mary Drake because Hannah manages to escape and Mary Drake conveniently turns up with a car to let her in, which is really weird because as we find out, Mary Drake's literally on the 18, but whatever. Yeah, things are really bad at this point because Allison's in Welby, but Archer Dunhill, her ex-husband, is drugging her to make her appear crazy. Allison reaches out to Emily for help, and Emily knows something's wrong with Archer Dunhill at this point, and so she's on to him. Allison escapes, but Elliot's kind of like kidnapped her, but while being taken away by Elliot, she alerts the girls to her whereabouts, and so the girls accidentally, well, Hannah's driving, but Hannah accidentally hits Elliot with her car as they're trying to save Allison. It was done completely with the best of intentions in mind, which was to help their friend Allison, and so they really haven't done anything wrong, but the girls are again idiots and they decide the best thing to do is lie and cover up the murder, even though if anyone finds out they'll go to jail. So they try to get Mona to help them hide the car, then A takes the car, they don't know where it's gone after Mona, and it's so dumb. It's so dumb because that is the leverage that A blackmails them with for the entirety of season 7, is basically, I'm going to go to the police about the fact that you killed Archer. I think at one point they even put Archer's body in Arya's boot without her realizing, and she nearly gets caught by the police and she's like, what's the body doing in there, you know? Luckily, Mona helps them cover up the murder of Elliot and make it seem like Elliot Archer is the same person. He has a fake name. So she decides to help them cover it up and make it look as if he just disappeared one day. So Allison's released into Mary Drake's care, and they find in the De Laurentiis house like a latex recipe for those freaky masks and drugs, all of which was meant to make Allison think she was going crazy, and blue contact lenses, which explains why Allison was hallucinating her ex, the police officer Wilden, because it was obviously a mask to look like him with blue contact lenses that Elliot would have been wearing. The fact his name is Archer and Elliot is so confusing. The liars start getting calls from Archer's burner phone, and it's like this new AD haunting them, and then they try and get this police officer kind of waiting outside Alison's house to protect her and make her feel more secure. But it turns out to be A, dressed as a police officer, who then violently attacks Alison in her own home. Then Sarah Harvey is killed by A in a shower, which is just absolutely beautiful and so symbolic in so many ways. The rest of the group discovers evidence that Mary Drake had another child, and I think it might be Noel. They figure out that Noel was in the dollhouse. Then the girls are lured to a closed down school for the blind, and Jenna and Noel are there. Jenna's there with a gun. She wants to avenge Charlotte's death because she liked Charlotte.
I smell your blood.
And Noel says they know too much. So she's like, I'm going to avenge Charlotte's death. I like Charlotte, whatever. So Noel tries to attack them. Jenna tries to attack them. Noel accidentally decapitates himself on an axe. And then Jenna accidentally kicks his head because she's blind, not realizing it's his head, and his head rolls down the stairs. The girls try to escape. Spencer gets shot. Then somehow Mary Drake miraculously appears, knowing they're there, and holds Spencer in her arms as Spencer is dying, and she reveals that she's actually Spencer's biological mother. Round 2, Spencer's furious at her mother Veronica for not actually being her real mother. And the lies are presented with an interactive board game by AD, featuring a map of important locations in Rosewood and little figures representing each of them and little traps, and so they kind of have to play the game, and so they're sometimes given puzzle pieces as rewards or punishments. Hannah tries to destroy the game, only to be kind of threatened with a video which reveals that AD is aware of their involvement in Rollins' death and will hold it against them for the rest of their lives. Episode 14, we find out that Lucas was at a camp for troubled boys for some reason. Caleb's nearly killed from strange gas that comes out of the board. Then Hannah's told to play again, but she's annoyed because it was Aria's turn to play, but she's being forced to play again and to like do things that she doesn't want to do and do things for AD. Sometimes AD will threaten them by going to the police, like sending Dr. Rollins' decomposing finger to the police station, for example. And the police are onto them at this point. The Rosewood police are onto them. Alison takes her turn next. She plays the game, and AD sends her to a baby store where she discovers that Emily... Ah, Jesus, that scared me. She discovers that Emily's eggs were implanted in her, which is traumatizing. AD basically threatens Aria, saying that they're going to expose Ezra for something bad, blah, blah, blah. So Aria, selfishly, to protect Ezra over her friends, joins the A-team, destroys Emily's nursery for the baby and all kinds of horrible stuff for AD just to protect Ezra. Then she's caught Black Hoodie by the other girls. Then we learn that Sydney, who's a completely irrelevant side character, is on the A-team and was blackmailed into it. Jen is on the A-team too, because I think AD paid for her to get an eye transplant in exchange for Jenna's temporary help, but Jenna didn't know who AD actually was. Then we have a musical scene in the Jailhouse Rock episode, season 7, episode 17, which always catches me off guard, and every time I rewatch it, I'm shocked by how bad it is. It's just appalling, the whole dance sequence. And then Veronica says at the end of the song, "I wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire," to Aria. What? Episode 19, Emily and Alison fall asleep on the sofa because I guess the horrendous forced impregnation brings them closer together, and as they're asleep, Emily has a vivid dream that Alison's going to get hurt and sucked through the wall, and they're all running towards her saying, "He's coming for you, he's already here, we came back for you, Alison," which means that whole hook we saw before season 6B, before the time jump, was a dream sequence. So this thing we've been waiting for like a whole season to see explained was a fucking dream sequence. Then we have Ezra's iconic line where he says, "I have a master's degree in American literature. There is nothing I can't handle." They try to get Mona involved to help them figure out who AD is. Mona warns Hannah that it's addictive and playing the game will be bad for her, but Hannah convinces her to do it anyway, which is a terrible idea because Mona loses her mind yet again. So they start suspecting Mona as AD. Mona becomes really fragile emotionally at this point, and she confesses to Hannah that she killed Charlotte. She said that Charlotte was planning to restart the game when she was released from Radley, and that she was still an absolute lunatic even after going to Radley, and she should not have been let out, and she was fully intending on hurting Alison and everything, which is so sad, by the way, because Alison actually chose to trust her. But anyway, Mona wanted to protect the girls, and she was like, that's not on Charlotte, and so she ended up killing Charlotte accidentally. And she's so traumatized by this, she kind of reverts into her old loser Mona persona. So the police take the girls to the station, I think for Rollins's murder, but at the station they witness Mary Drake confessing to both Rollins's murder and Jessica's murder, and Mary gives them the iconic shush, and the girls are free to go. And I guess Mary Drake admitted to this because she felt guilty and kind of threw herself under the bus, as she didn't want her own daughter Spencer to go to jail. Kind of makes sense, because in a weird way, despite how messed up she is, Spencer's still her child and she doesn't want her to go to jail. Mona has to go to Welby, a mental hospital, and the girls feel like they've got closure, and now AD knows who killed Charlotte. Maybe AD's got closure and AD won't torture them anymore, which seems to be the case because the threats stop and we see AD driving off into the sunset, which I find really lame, because it makes you wonder if AD was ever planning on coming back and torturing them, or if there was any real motive there at all to hurt them other than finding out who Charlotte's murderer was, or if they're just satisfied with knowing the truth and backing off. Everything seems to be fine, but it's actually not fine, which leads us to the finale of the show, where obviously these threats return, because you know it can't be the end because there's only one more episode. There is one more episode, and this was really well done, to be fair, because it's kind of unsettling, because you're like, it can't be the end. There's still one more episode to go. AD knows who the killer is, but how can there be one more episode? So it's very unsettling. This leads us to the finale. Mona is visited by a hooded figure, and she wonders if they're going to kill her. And there's a dream sequence of Jenna on a horse and Lucas tap dancing, which seems like a really time efficient way to spend the 1 hour of the show we have left. Fast forward 1 year later, Spencer and Alison have renovated the Lost Woods. We're convinced at this point that Mona maybe is on the A team because it's been 1 year, so it's plenty of time for AD to maybe indoctrinate her. Alison and Emily now have twin daughters who are somehow blonde and blue-eyed. They have this bachelorette dinner at the Lost Woods, and I was quite shocked to see Melissa lurking in the shadows. So it seemed like it was an AD reveal of Melissa being AD, only to find out it was Mona wearing a mask of Melissa, which was extremely annoying. At the rehearsal dinner for her wedding, Hannah surprises everyone by bringing Mona along, much to everyone's displeasure, even though Mona literally helped cover up a murder for them. But later, Spencer is really taken aback because Mona knocks her out in the barn, so I guess she wasn't really to be trusted, and I think people overlook that Mona reverted again to her old self. But maybe Mona was planning on actually knocking Spencer out, but ultimately helping them and saving them from AD, you could argue, because she does kind of help at the end. But when Spencer wakes up, she finds herself in an underground bunker, and she kind of sees her reflection like this, and she's like, okay, AD's kidnapped me. And then she lowers her hand, and the reflection doesn't lower their hand, and she realizes that she's staring not at her reflection but at her twin sister she didn't know existed, a British Alex Drake. And Mary Drake, her mother, is there too. So AD is a twin, Spencer's twin sister, daughter of Mary Drake, who we never knew existed, aside from a few twins, well, a few scenes earlier where for instance, like that dream scene Hannah had of the Spencer but without bangs, or Spencer weirdly looking through a photo album where now you look back in it, you realize that it was actually the twin and not Spencer. Like this really weird scene of Spencer and Ren at the airport when Spencer had just been somewhere else. So obviously it was her twin, so there were clues, but it was just trash. But we learned that Ren was on the AD team too, this ex-romantic interest of Spencer's, and then he said that Alex Drake took it too far, so she turned him into an eternity stone. So that's great. And he also fathered Alison's twins apparently, which explains why the babies are so pretty. But anyway, Alex had also kidnapped Ezra too because he suspected her, which is why Ezra hadn't turned up for the wedding day. The group searches for Ezra. Alex locks Spencer up and then takes her place and returns to hang out with the girls. So the girls think it's Spencer, and she lies down in bed and creepily strokes Aria's head, saying Aria's her favorite, which was never explained. Spencer's odd behavior starts to raise some suspicion, but ultimately it's Jenna and a horse that figures out that Spencer isn't Spencer. Mona reveals she knows where they are, leading them to the house Toby built. So I guess that's why Mona knocked Spencer out, is because she wanted to be on the know about everything by pretending to be on the side of AD. But she leads them to the house Toby built, where they discover the underground bunker, which somehow with a bunch of money she had, Alex Drake had managed to renovate this bunker without Toby noticing. Suddenly a cop arrives and saves Spencer, claiming to have already detained Mary Drake. It's only one cop though. And then Mona's like, oh, it's okay, I dialed 911, he's a police officer. Now, it's not actually the police, it's Mona's just fake police officer boyfriend, because Mona wanted to have her revenge and lock up Mary Drake and Alex Drake in a bunker and kind of detain them to be the ultimate winner of the game in her own little dollhouse, and I guess punish them. And that was her plan all along, is to really win the game and to just... obviously there's some issues with this. For one, the fact that there's only one police officer that shows up to save them, and that afterwards no one goes to the police or Detective Tanner or anyone. And then the police, because the police would say, you never call 911, Mona never called 911. In that case, the girls would go to Mona and say, you didn't call 911. In that case, she would say, oh yeah, I've got them in my basement. The fact that no police report was filed, they never went to a station, and no one suspected that wasn't weird. The fact that they left and walked around after Spencer was saved, and they never considered that the police never came to interrogate them or interview them or anything about this almost murder. Like, Alex Drake was going to murder Spencer with an axe. Let's not even talk about that British accent. Hello, sister, I nearly died. Also, the fact that Mona somehow managed to transport the AD and Mary Drake to Paris, and no one... what did she do? Put them in her suitcase? How did she get them through the airport security checks? At the end of the show, like I said, Mona has relocated to France and has this doll shop, and that's where she keeps Mary and Alex captive, treating them like dolls. And so that's her happy ending, is happy relationship, but then the secret sadistic side where she has her own little dolls. Makes no sense, but okay, go off, queen. Then obviously we have a happy wedding between Aria and Ezra, and Aria, marrying her beloved groomer. This completely irrelevant sub-character called Addison, who's like a mean girl of the school that Emily works at, who has no relevance. She's just this trash teenage girl. But the series, the final scene of our beloved show is of Addison, this side character, waking up, well, her friends waking up to find her missing. And they all search, and their friend Sydney Sweeney reveals that Addison is gone, and she believes she heard her scream. And that is the extremely underwhelming ending, where the show ends not with our actual liars all hugging, excited about Hannah's pregnancy, excited to be finally safe from torture, but it ends with these random girls. It's meant to be full circle, but it's a blatant copy of the beginning of the pilot, which also makes no sense. So yeah, that's the ending. Yeah. So let's talk about, if I rewrote the show, kind of what I would do, because I did tell you guys I wouldn't gatekeep this. I was going to tell you. So if I rewrote the show, I would have either Aria and Allison as A, or just Aria as A, or I would have Ezra and Aria as like a team as A, or just Ezra. That's what I would do. One of those main characters. That would be my decision. So if I was really unsure, maybe I would make it Jessica De Laurentiis, but she's a bit too minor a character. So the reason why I say Ezra is because there's plenty of clues, as I said earlier, that it should have been Ezra. We know Ezra was writing a true crime novel, and there's a link between the name Ezra Fitzgerald and the real person F. Scott Fitzgerald. Ezra was supposed to dress up as Scott Fitzgerald on the Halloween train because Scott Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby, and that's why Aria is dressed up as Daisy Buchanan from The Great Gatsby. So let's say Ezra considers himself this author. If he thought Aria was A, maybe he'd be trying to make her the main character of one of his novels, and that would imply that maybe even the show itself isn't real and is just taking place within Ezra's story, like a story within a story. could have been really cool because of all the literary references, like To Kill a Mockingbird and to all sorts of books throughout. When the liars went to Ravenswood for the great Charlemagne, and the Charlemagne used Arya for a magic trick and he puts her in a box, it could have been to show that she's got two personalities. You know, Arya who comes into the box and then the different Arya who comes out of the box, which links to the whole dissociative identity disorder I mentioned before. And that would make so much sense, especially because the great Charlemagne singled Arya out to go in that box. She's like, I don't want to. She gestures to Spencer and says, pick Spencer, she loves magic. The great Charlemagne shakes his head and points back to her, implying that everything goes back to Arya. And it would have made so much sense if Ezra was that he was writing this book where he considers, let's say he knew, or maybe let's say Ezra was just an author. Maybe he knew Arya was and so he wanted to write this book from Arya's perspective as a killer, as and that's why he was fascinated by her and dating her, and then they teamed up. And you know how they had this whole conversation around sometimes the villains win, the villains get happy endings? It would have been so cool if they were like this evil power couple writing this terrifying crime story and then actually trying to act it out in real life, and the same way serial killers try to reenact crimes from books they've read or literary things or movies they take a bit too seriously. Also because there's always been this literary connection between Pretty Little Liars and Alice in Wonderland, and the Dollhouse also really made it clear this connection that always existed between the two. Think of the link between the name Alice in the book and Allison, both of which are little blonde girls. So I thought it was meant to be this reference to how Ezra was obsessed with Allison, like how they were saying that Ezra's following Allison everywhere, and then Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland, was actually obsessed with this little girl called Alice. So I thought it was this whole thing. There was this whole, everyone was talking about how the author of Alice in Wonderland was a pedo and Ezra is a pedo. So I thought it was the show trying to tell us that Ezra is not to be trusted and that he has this creepy pedo obsession with Allison, and that's why he was and he was stalking the girls, which he wasn't. But I thought it was this whole link, especially because the author, Lewis Carroll, his birth name was Charles Dodgson, which is literally Charles, like Charles de Laurentiis, So I thought it was all pointing us to Ezra, which it wasn't. But it's very creepy when you consider a reference to the Mad Hatter with a box that Hannah picks up. Allison has a trial in court in the same way there's a parody of a trial in Alice in Wonderland. The Queen of Hearts and the multiple links between Arya and the Queen of Hearts. And season 1 to 2, I'd still have Mona as the first but then season 3, I would have the NAT club be the main focus. I make the NAT club a way bigger deal. Seasons 4 to 5, senior year, I would make the Dollhouse half a season. I wouldn't have CC Drake be that's for sure. Maybe she'd be like a supporting but like I said, I would do the A's very differently. I think I'd have like maybe a mid-season A be someone different, you know, like someone more legitimate, you know, like maybe Jessica De Laurentiis. I would have been very happy though if Allison was because everything leads back to Allison. Noel Khan, I would have be a nicer guy and be Arya's love interest, or Jason if he was younger and a nicer guy. Obviously, I would have him not be part of the NAT club, and yeah, would never have had her marry Ezra. Any supernatural elements would have been removed. The Vivian Darkbloom thing would have been a way bigger deal. And obviously I wouldn't have had this constant lazy repetition of the twin thing. So that's how I would have done it. And I think I would have been very happy if it was done that way. I also would have just given Emily a few love interests rather than so many scattered ones and so many like different random people like Samara and Talia. Also, Talia was a grown woman with a husband. Why would he be okay? Why would she date? The show really loves making us root for like this weird age gap, underage relationship things. But let me know what you think of this recap. This isn't even half of what happens in the show, but I thought I wanted to keep it somewhat concise and just include the most important things. But let me know what you think. This was hilarious and that was completely unhinged, but I loved filming it, and I am going to do another one of these for like Once Upon a Time. So stay tuned and I will see you for the next one. Mwah.